Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to Normal America Show, host Rob Noerr. I promised myself I'd stop calling it the Normal America Show. My friend told me, he's like, just brand everything Rob Noerr. We do with the Normal America. But that would require the energy of me actually going in and changing my little graphics and stuff like that. And if there's one thing I have a lack of, it's energy, unless I'm arguing with moron lefties until 3 a.m., like last night. But I do have some energy for this stream today. I'm very excited. I will be talking to someone who I've respected and enjoyed their work, Ian Crossland. Ian, I first saw as a co-host on Tim Pool's show. I've since seen much of what he does himself, both on his writings on X and also episodes that he's done on his own channel, which I'm grateful to have the opportunity to do today. I think it'll be great. We're looking at about a 1-hour interview. I think it's just going to be a general discussion. Sort of any topics that Ian wants to broach is fine by me, but it's not like we're having a debate where we're specifically going to hit one specific topic or anything like that. So I think in general, we'll be just talking about sort of what I do, my worldview, things like that. So first thing I want to do is I would really appreciate anyone who's watching right now on any of the platforms. I'm going to put a link to Ian's show. And I hope that everyone will go there. Even if you watch the show on my channel, I hope you'll go give it a thumbs up on Ian's show, because I think that, it would be really nice if our audience could bring something to his show as well and try to get some exposure there as well. So please consider doing that once the show goes live here at 3 p.m. Consider, if you want to watch the show on his channel, no problem, totally cool. If not, just consider going to his YouTube channel real quick, giving him a thumbs up, maybe giving him a sub. I think it'll be good. Achilles says, me schooling Pisco last night was epic. Yeah, I mean, pretty bad if you have the patience to actually go through it step by step in a lot of these issues, it looks pretty bad for him. By the way, Pisco not having a good day today. I tuned into his show briefly because I could not for the life of me find a link to the oral arguments in the Colorado kicking Trump off the ballot case. But I went to Twitch and I saw one of the top feeds was that Pisco was streaming them. And mercifully, he wasn't talking much, so I actually got to hear the oral arguments as I was sort of doing some housework. I didn't listen to all of them, but it's a bloodbath, as predicted. I mean, it's a terrible case. Absolute terrible case. My prediction is an 8-1 or a 9-0 that they're going to roll in Trump's favor, that he can't be removed from the ballot in Colorado there. And that's going to look real bad for someone like Pisco that said that this was a legitimate case. The lawyer got eviscerated. Even questions coming in from the left-wing justices like Ketanji Jackson was not good. So, But yeah, he got smacked around. I didn't check YouTube. I was on my phone. I went to Safari and I typed it in on my search engine. So, but I doubt we'll be talking about that much. So I got about 4 minutes and then I'm going to hop in backstage. I'll probably put this to my intro while I'm backstage because I don't. One of the things, this is like so I assume anytime I'm on camera talking to someone else that it is recorded and will eventually be made public. I assume private Discord messages that I have with people will eventually be made public. I assume that private text messages I have with people will eventually be made public, with the exception of like maybe text messaging my wife. But so I'm not saying a bunch of malicious stuff behind the scenes. It's what you see is what you get, basically. I might, if I'm talking to Aftershock, be like, ooh, I thought that was a shitty argument that this guy I made on this, or I think this is shitty what this guy's doing. And I might not publicly say that. But if Aftershock ever got pissed at me and released all of those text messages, it would not do much to damage my credibility, because I'd say, yeah, it wasn't like a real malicious thing I said. I just said I thought this person was acting stupid. However, having said all that, I do try to be conscious that maybe not everyone operates that way. So if I'm doing someone else's channel and they say, hey, come backstage 5-10 minutes before we're going to go live, and I'm already streaming, I don't know if they know when I get on there that I'm streaming. They might think, oh, it's just people talking backstage. None of this is live yet. So I always try to at least have some sort of delay until those people know, hey, I'm streaming, because I don't want to spring anything on anyone. Yeah, Safari. That's what I use on my phone. That's my search engine. Is that stupid? Is that a boomer move? Well, okay, my brother who's on here. Yeah, I'm okay. I assume when I'm talking to my brother, he's not recording me and it's going to be released, you know. No, I don't think Sparky would sell me out either. But Sparky, the FBI might arrest you and then get your messages and make them public that you had with me. So I don't think you would do it intentionally. But I think it's just good policy. You know, other policies I have is anytime I see a camera, even if it's in my house and it looks like it's off and my computer's off, I operate as if it's on. So you can see me walking across nude or something because I thought my camera was on. I don't do that. I assume you're not going to see my computer that I have here. There are some games on it, but there is nothing illicit on this computer whatsoever. So I saw the other day, allegedly, Vosh. I don't know if he did this on purpose. Maybe it's just a gag. But allegedly, he had folder pop up of pornographic material while he was live streaming. I don't have to worry about that. If someone came through and took my phone or took my computer, there's nothing like that. You will find gross pictures on my phone, though. Most of them are of my receding hairline that I was taking pictures of, but that's about it. Or I was doing some weight loss photos with my shirt off, so you might get to see my fat gut. But other than that, there's nothing. I remember when we did those Odyssey games, I was on there and Connor was on there. The last event was, I lost. I was drunk as shit and I ate bugs and then I lost. Connor, I think he told me the last event to win $10,000 was him and the person he was going against had to literally put their phone up and scroll through all of their pictures that they have saved on their phone. And Connor's like, dude, I'm like a boomer dad. Like, I don't have anything embarrassing. It's just pictures of me and my family. And the other guy was like, I'm going to tap out. Me and Connor could have sat there all day and been like, there's a picture of my kid at the playground. And there's my wife and that cool lasagna she made last week. Oh, here's when I pressure washed the side of my house. Like, there's nothing really fun on my phone. Well, all right, let me hop backstage here. So you're going to lose my video for a moment. So bear with me. All right, we're going to go black for a second. Again, one more. If anyone's there, if you could periodically post throughout this hour interview this link. That link right there is to Ian's chat and to his channel. All right, I'll be right with you. Just one more thing I want to check here. Okay, we're good. All right, be right with you. we're still waiting. So here's what we could do. We could talk without you seeing my face, but I'm too much of a boomer to set it up so you can see my face while we're waiting here. I don't have two cameras or split the camera or anything like that. But I have to say, one of the things I wanted to say here. By the way, I think I probably have a face for radio anyways. So it's, radio is one of the things I always really wanted to do. I had a radio show there briefly, and I would love to do that as a career. Rush Limbaugh being one of the bigger influences on me. There we go. What's happening? I'll be right back. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, he's a. No, that's basically. I am as average of a person as you could imagine. I'm from rural Pennsylvania. I've lived within 20 miles of where I'm at now my whole life. Everyone knows blue collar people that make like 12, 13 bucks an hour. I happen to not be good at any of the blue collar stuff that I grew up around. I was a pretty good debater. I went to local state school, did policy debate in college, and became pretty good at it. But the people I always respected the most and thought about the most were the people back home, the sort of blue collar people in rural America that I feel don't really have a voice in our system today. And I started streaming and posting on blog posts and stuff about what I saw as sort of those people being left behind, specializing in what I would say is corruption, because I don't think these institutions care at all about the people that come from my area. And just in case you're wondering, people that come from other areas, like if you're from an urban environment or you're from a more, suburban environment, you went to an Ivy League school or something. They don't really care about us. And so that's what my focus is. It depends. So I think that unions, the idea behind a union is something that I completely support. So the idea that there are corporations or massive businesses that could take advantages of people is absolutely true. And people coming together to use what they can to bargain. For example, even though it's not necessarily a union, the idea behind a union is similar to like we would see with the trucker convoy strike in Canada, where a bunch of people realize that they're in a unique position now to affect political change by banding their labor together. In this sense, truckers, that everyone's dependent on all of their stuff in the inner city, they're getting screwed over by these lockdowns in the United States and Canada, and so they banded together. Now, the problem with unions is that oftentimes they themselves can become the very corrupt entity that the formation for them sought to prevent in the first place. So my father, for example, worked at a local company around here. He worked at a window company. He made windows, and they brought a union in. They had a marginal raise that they got that was almost offset by the union dues that they had to pay. And within a year, the company shut down. He went into work on a Tuesday, and they said, pack up your stuff. You're done by Friday. So it's a double-edged sword. Right. And the pay that was coming, like, it wasn't what the people that brought in the union were promised. So there was marginal increases in their wages and more time off and stuff like that. But it wasn't to the level that they said. And by the time they were paying their union dues and things of that nature, ended up not working out for them. Mm-hmm. What's all of the above? Life is funny. There's a yin and a yang to everything. And when you're talking about political motivations or political ability and things like that, there's always a double-edged sword, a good and a bad, that could come from anything. Like, I was talking to my brother the other day. He's not really big into politics. And we were talking about different political systems, communism or direct democracy, republic. And I was like, you could probably make an argument that the most effective, simplest governing system would be a benevolent dictator. Like a really smart dictator that cared about everyone probably would be able to cut through red tape and actually, a benevolent king. He would be able to say, oh, your family's in trouble. We could use our resources to help you. Oh, this guy's corrupt. To heck with him. The problem is that would also be the worst system, right? Because if you have someone that's inept or someone that's evil, they're going to be able to use that position and there's not going to be checks on it. The same is true of populism. I consider myself a populist. I think the pendulum has swung so bad to where we have this sort of institutional people, these establishment people, and I could talk about exactly who I mean by that if you want, that have obtained so much power that they basically look at themselves as the new feudal system, that we're their serfs, the average people are serfs, and they are the lords in the manor. And the tool we have to fight against that is populism. And we have all these tools such as the internet and all these other things where we could come together on these hot button issues and actually have a voice. In years past, we would have had to have gatekeepers. So to have a voice, you would have had to get on a news channel or something like that or print a book. Now you can say whatever you want about YouTube and Twitch, and I certainly have a lot of criticisms about how terms of service and how algorithms have manipulated to benefit those authoritarians. But overall, I'm talking to you right now, and there could be people all over the world that are listening to me. I didn't have that chance 20 years ago at all. I would still be right here in rural Pennsylvania at the local bar complaining about politics and the Pittsburgh Steelers, dropping out of the playoffs.
YouTube videos, and I was like, wow, this technology's changed everything. We have complete control of our political system now. We can make great changes. Call your congressman tomorrow at 2 p.m. Like, I would coordinate these political things. I've made a video to Barack Obama, say, you're going to win the presidency, you're going to serve 2 terms. YouTube featured it, so there's some corporate fascism. Like, they're like, yes, we want Obama to be president too. We will feature this thing. And so we got our way. But then I was like, wow, I think I was inadvertently leading a cultural revolution in that behavior, without realizing, a cult of personality. People, I noticed they were less about what I was talking about, my ideas, and more about Ian, what do you eat for breakfast? It's Ian, everyone, it's Ian. And I'd be like, yeah, but what I'm talking about, these concepts, they're like, I don't, it's Ian. And I'm like, oh my God, it's like a cult. It's just like it was like the Bolsheviks. It was about Lenin, the cult of Lenin. It became the cult of Mao in China. And I felt that with this populist internet video thing. So I backed off for a decade and I was like, I got to build systems where people can learn to help themselves with free software with minds.com, for instance. I co-founded that with Bill Ottman, who will be on IRL tonight and Culture War tomorrow. And it felt better to teach people how to fish than to constantly be trying to give people fish. I.e. build systems where people could help themselves as opposed to try and just interface one-on-one with people and be like, you're going to be okay. You're going to be better. You're good who you are. Didn't feel sustainable. It felt so, that's where I'm at now. I the whole rallying, but the thing is rallying the crowd. I mean, will there ever be anything that can stand up to it? Do you think that we need a time and a place right now of human history where we some cult leader steps up and rallies the crowd to divert attention away from this this global ordinance, this manifestation of a new world order into this corporate fascist dictatorship?
So personally, as someone, I consider myself a Christian, but a bad Christian. I don't talk about my religion a lot. I am unique in what I talk a lot of religious people. I feel like sometimes we think we're in a story, we're in a video game or a movie, and it's the good guy always wins in the end. I don't look at it like that necessarily. The good guy wins in the end if you're spiritual and you're religious and you go to heaven or your everlasting soul goes to a place. That's fine. I'm not here to pontificate on people's personal salvation and religion. In this world, I don't think necessarily that we win. You see this a lot, particularly with people in my neck of the woods that talk about fighting authoritarianism. We're there. We're almost there. This next story's going to break. If we just elect Donald Trump, if we just elect Ron DeSantis, if we win one more election, if we just get these policies at school boards changed, I think we are decades and decades and decades away from hard work in our culture before we even start to move the pendulum back. We're still at the stopping the destruction phase. In order to get toward the phase where we're actually making what I think is progress into sort of a world of, as someone who I consider myself a conservative, but I'm more of a libertarian conservative. So I value people's free will. People, like, sort of what you're talking about there, like letting people live their own lives and achieve their own successes or failures. That's life. That's what makes life worth living. And I think in order to get to that phase, we're a long way away. So do we need charismatic leaders that people could rally behind politically? Sure, that's something that could be one path that would be effectual, and probably is inevitable that those sort of things will happen. I think that oftentimes that leads to other huge problems. For example, I volunteered for Trump's campaign in 2020, and yet I heavily criticized him for all sorts of things, for supporting lockdowns, for some of his other decisions on COVID, for bombing Syria, for massive spending. And I was told by people that listened to every one of my shows, like, you're great, you're great, you're great. All of a sudden, on a dime, large portions of them turned on me. You can't criticize him. And those people were people that looked at it like, it wasn't that they looked at themselves as individuals and said, I support Trump because he supports the values that I support. They supported Trump because he was the character. He was their king. He was their leader. And so if he changed his position tomorrow on gun control, they would change their position. If he says Bud Light's an evil corporation today, they're evil. But if he says they're great tomorrow, then they're great. So, yeah, I mean, it's difficult. I will say real quick, though, on the previous, what you were talking about, the fact that you have the introspection as someone who recognizes, albeit maybe you don't have a voice to the extent that like Donald Trump does, if you're on these platforms, even if there's only 5 and 10 people listening to you, you should understand that you do have a voice, and there is some sort of moral obligation that comes with that voice. And to have the introspection to step back and say, like, well, I want to make sure that I'm doing what I think's right, not abusing this. I commend you for that. And it's something that I think about a lot. And I try to constantly let people know one of the advantages I think I have is I am as average of a person as you'll ever meet. That I happen to have one set of skills that's pretty good. I'm a pretty good debater. I'm a weird guy that's interested in delving into court documents and delving into like all of these crazy stories. But that doesn't make me any better than anyone else. Maybe you're an awesome carpenter. You can have influential changes to drive this country to a positive place, both culturally and politically, through the skill sets that you have. The number one thing that I have and that you have, Ian, or any other person that people would think are successful and worth listening to, is that we are authentic. This is who we are. We're not pretending. And as long as you have that authenticity, and you're doing what you think is best, and you're trying to educate yourself, and you're trying to move forward to improve your life, the lives of the people around you, and our society's life, I think that you're doing the right thing.
I think so too. It's sad when people that are being authentic get co-opted by money, but so they start to get paid for their behavior, and then they're like, "Oh, I should do more of this." But like, it's nice when people kind of notice that something's askew. They're like, "There's something about this that doesn't feel like I'm being like." It was same at Hollywood. I felt like they were paying me to sell sex and to sell Wendy's, and I'm like, I don't even like Wendy's. I don't eat that stuff anymore, and they're gonna pay me $20,000 to tell everyone to eat it. And it was like, I just can't do this anymore, man. I don't want to feed poison to the masses for money. There's other ways. Like, I'd rather grovel and work for $200 a week and build something great than get all this cash up front. That was kind of my mindset. I didn't even know what I was going to do. I just kind of dropped out of that.
It's interesting. Like, so one of the experiences I could tell you about is I had a small network of streamers that are slightly larger than me, not to Tim's size, not like Alex Jones size, but people that were on YouTube. There were a lot of right-wing people on YouTube back in like before 2016 that were growing pretty sizable audiences to the point where it was economically viable to make that your career. And I was, kind of in text exchanges with people like that, probably 30 to 40 people that were creators that just, talk around. It was unbelievable how many of them reached out to me when I was criticizing Trump in 2020. I voted for Trump. I worked on Trump's campaign. So for anyone says I'm never Trump, I'm going to vote for Trump. I'm vigorously pushing for Trump in 2024. But that doesn't mean I can't criticize him. And I had all these people reaching out to me saying, privately, we agree with your criticism of Trump on this particular issue. But we can't say anything publicly because we would lose large portions of our audience. And there's a question that you have to, it's like, well, that's crap. That's terrible. You're not authentic. But then you have to think about it to a certain extent. Like, I'm a father now. If this is my hobby, I have almost complete and total freedom, because if I lose my entire channel tomorrow, my son's livelihood doesn't change at all. I basically break even. I average 30, 40 people watching me at this point. If I quit my job and all of a sudden this became my career, would my calculus be different? Would I say, I'm not going to completely lie? I don't think that's what people are doing. But if you're like, well, if I just ignore this one little story, I think that won't aggravate my fans, and then I don't risk losing, my son's, money to go to, the private school that we're going to send him to or something like that. So it's weird. I feel the same way in the entertainment industry. I grew up listening to metal music and punk music. So I lived on the outskirts of Pittsburgh. First show I ever went and saw was the Dead Kennedys without Jello Biafra because they had a restraining order. Him and East Bay Ray had a restraining order against each other. But there were all these metal bands that opened for them. Some of the best shows I've ever seen are no-name metal bands from like hole-in-the-wall places that you've never seen, or punk bands. They're completely uninhibited. They don't have that influence that's being put on them from outside forces. They don't have, well, this is my career and I'm making thousands of dollars, so now I have a lot to lose, so I got to mind my P's and Q's. So it's difficult. I'm not saying that people shouldn't strive to become successful and influential and that you shouldn't be allowed to get money, and that's fine. But it's something that's constantly in the back of my head as well. I ran for Congress. Who's to say 10 years, if I would have won and been in Congress for 10 years, would I even be able to recognize myself? Or would have I had little time? Well, I'll take money from this corporation and give them just the smallest thing that they want because it's for the greater good, because I'm right on all of these other things. And then after, you're Nancy Pelosi and you're there for 30 years, you can't even recognize yourself. You owe everyone favors, you just don't care anymore. So how do you check your own ego? How do you check yourself and make sure that, you're continuing to be authentic while at the same time understanding it's okay and understandable to want to make a living and to listen to other people? It's difficult.
Yeah, like being honest is part of it, but that doesn't mean you have to say everything you're thinking, and there's discretion, and like there's a time and a place to say what you think. Like I was trying to just like, whenever I had like a thought that would come in my head, I'd be like, well, I have to tell the world. If this is coming into my mind, I need to clear it out. And then people would be like, you asshole, you idiot. And I'd get like the haters would come in and it's like, well, I could have not said that thing and wouldn't have got that backlash, but it was honest. It wasn't the best financial thing because the commercial agents are like, Ian, don't say that shit online. We can't cast you in the next Arby's commercial if people think that you're a stoned anarchist or whatever the hell they were like. So I don't know if it was about chasing that money. Like, this is my grand hypothesis. I'll tell you what I think it is. Basically, that there's been like an attempt at a slow coup over this country for like 120 years at least since 1913, that there's a financial coup going on with this formation of the Federal Reserve Act. And then it probably started before that. And if you know more about this, I'd love to go deeper on it with you. Then into the business plot in 1933, where all these bankers and businessmen tried to get Smedley Butler to overthrow the U.S. government, lead a fascist revolution in the United States, march 500,000 men on Washington, D.C. and overthrow FDR. Like, that actually happened. 500,000 man attempted coup that Smedley shut down. He came out in public and talked about it. Then you've got, JFK assassination. He's trying to break up the CIA. They put him out. Then we go to Vietnam. I don't know how deep Vietnam is with all this. But then you've got 9/11, the security state apparatus that's now forming, and it feels like COVID, the transfer of wealth. It feels like, and it's about like a lot of it's economic. So like you can kind of disentangle from that system with crypto, but then if you want to sell your crypto on Coinbase, you still need a bank account with American dollars to get your cash to spend it in the US. So we're still kind of part of the system that I'm complaining about right now. Do you see that hypothesis as functional? Do you actually see that there is a slow coup or there has been an attempt at one?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I think the tools that they use change, and sort of what that looks like changes based on our standard of living and technology and how we live. For example, the way the average person in the United States lives today, or in the first world lives today, vastly different than at the turn of the 1900s. Like it's vastly different, and so the tools they use are different. So it's why you won't see things as much like assassinations or like with the Smedley Butler situation. You won't see things that are that blatant anymore because the tools we have are more sophisticated, which also means the tools they have are more sophisticated. And so if you look at sort of, the history of advertising, the history of influencing people, one of the quotes I like to use a lot because I'm just a simple person is the quote from the movie Men in Black, right, where Tommy Lee Jones tells Will Smith right at the beginning of the movie. Will Smith's like, is it worth it to give your whole life up to become a Men in Black? And they're kind of having that conversation. And Will Smith says, this can't work. People are smart. And Tommy Lee Jones says a person is smart. People are dumb, scared animals, and you know it. And that's true, right? They have it down to a science as to how to influence a plurality of people. And within that plurality of people are a lot of people that are individually smart, and they're individuals and they have their own goals and dreams, but they know how to tailor messages and how to tailor culture in order to influence a plurality of people. They'll never get everyone, but they don't have to, right? And you could see the slow drip, how it's accelerating. I agree with you that there was a slow coup. I think that it's accelerating. For me, the way I put it is, and I'm not saying what you're saying is wrong. I agree with 99% of what you're saying. The way I phrase it that makes sense to me is, I think that there is an attempt at a global system. They want globalism. And the biggest impediment to that is people in the first world that are more self-sufficient. So they don't like the middle class, particularly the middle class in places like the United States. They want your business shut down. They want you completely reliant on the government. And once you're completely reliant on the government, you're basically a serf. You'll do what they want. You'll stop criticizing them, or they'll shut the valve off. No more bread and circuses for you then. We'll shut off your bank account. They don't even have to throw you into jail. By the way, if you're religious, this sounds a lot like when I went to church and we would talk about the book of Revelations and sort of the mark of the beast and stuff like that. I'm not going to get into that, but I think it's interesting to think about that sort of stuff. And so what happens is, I think with the election of Donald Trump and Brexit, those were the two seminal events that I think what happened was they believed their own hubris. They were like, we got this in the bag. Yeah, give the people their votes. And I think the uniparty in the United States, the Republican leaderships, your Mitch McConnells, your Romneys, your Paul Ryans, they were like, that's fine. We want Hillary to win. So it'll be Hillary versus Trump. Give people their outlet. Trump gets crushed. 99% chance. Hillary's the president. We say, hey, you had your election. Same with Brexit. Okay, the people want to vote? Fine. Here's your vote. You could vote against globalism. And then they were shocked that they lost both of those. And they said never again. However, something happened. They realized even though the evidence of the corruption was now being outed like never before, there were no consequences. None. And now we're at a time where you, Ian, could do a 4-hour show bringing on Glenn Greenwald or Matt Taibbi talking about the Twitter files. Here is what your government did to censor people talking on these online social media spaces where 90% of our cultural and political discussion happens. And it's nothing. Within 3 days, everyone forgets about it. Oh, well, whatever. What can I do? And it has to do because it's now so overwhelming how insidious these tools that are being used to us, and people are still comfortable. And until people become uncomfortable to the point where they realize, and you started to see that with, like, I think COVID. I don't know about you, Ian. I saw people in my life that never had an interest in politics whatsoever. I'd be at a party with them. They'd be like, here goes this guy talking about politics again. All of a sudden, they lost their home. Their business was shut down. Their mom died in a nursing home, and they weren't allowed to have a funeral for them. And all of a sudden, they were like, wow, this stuff does matter. But it's like no one's been held accountable. And it's just every day it seems like we get more and more evidence of corruption and blatant double standards and just in complete and total contempt and hostility. You know, you could even see rappers saying it now. Like, my goodness, I know people in Compton that can't afford to live, and yet they're giving $1,000 a month cards to illegal immigrants that are coming. They're becoming more and more blatant. And until we wake up and see people enforce some sort of, and when I say enforce consequence, I ain't talking violence. That's not what I'm saying. But there needs to be some sort of accountability. And until then, the dial's just going to keep ratcheting up on what you call a soft coup. I agree.
Yeah, Stephen Smith has been speaking out against they were going to give illegal immigrants, like, I think, a $54 million food package or something, food stamps or whatever it was. And he's like, what in the hell? And so he's kind of breaking the matrix. I noticed it with, I guess I'd call it cognitive dissonance, where it's like, I see that. That is true, but I cannot integrate that into my understanding of reality. Like, for me, it was 9/11 and this thing called Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, which Richard Gage started. And they had all these architects and engineers around the world, 1,600 of them or more, identify and like analyze the buildings, 9/11, the September 11th World Trade Centers falling down. And a lot of them, the engineers and architects, were like, the way it falls in a near free fall speed, both those buildings fall in near free fall, indicates that the supports were blown out, which indicates a controlled demolition of the building. These are experts, one after another, being like, that indicates a controlled demolition. Buildings don't fall in free fall, near free fall, unless you blow out the supports. That would mean that you'd have to control that demolition. They go straight down. That's a controlled So I'm like, okay, my reality is shattered. I think maybe I'm part of the empire. Maybe we're the bad guys. Maybe there's more to this. And I'm trying to tell people, and like, it's math. It's like 2 + 2 = 4. And they're like, but my whole life I've been told it is equal to 5, man. I know it equals 4, but trying to even getting them to say that is like, okay, I know those buildings fell in near free fall. I watch it with my own eyes. Now let your brain do that uncomfortable calculation to understand what that means, that the supports have been blown out beforehand. Like that's the only way to do a controlled demolition is you line the supports before you demolish the building. Like that's as far as I'll go with that, because I don't know who did it. I never make those claims. I just see what happened, and it's like, okay, that shattered my vision.
Well, that's absolutely right. There are seminal moments that occur that are narratives that the authoritarians and the establishment latch onto. 9/11 is one of them, which results in the Patriot Act, which is a huge amount of rights being taken away from you. You could see just recently how these events are accelerating. Here, and for me, it's not the event itself. It's the reaction you get from these people in positions of power to questioning the event. For example, here's the question I asked after 9/11, which made me raise an eyebrow. I said, the Pentagon's supposed to be pretty much the most secure building in the world, right? People say, sure. We have the most impressive military, the most impressive Air Force, and this is the center of sort of our military leadership and intel leadership. So it should be heavily protected. So explain to me how 2 planes attacked the building, and yet they were still able to get into airspace and physically attack the Pentagon. How did that happen? And my question is, who's been held accountable? Which policies have been changed? Now, this isn't a conspiracy in the sense of I'm accusing it of being an inside job. I'm just saying, okay, taking the official narrative, there was an incredible failure. And so what has changed? And you know what the response was to me? You're a conspiracy theorist. You think the towers were holograms. You hate America. And I'm like, what? Very similar to this. See if this sounds similar to you. It wasn't that there was, okay, because of COVID, we changed the way we voted in 2020, and that led to things that maybe was a little less secure. But we don't see that there was an amount of malfeasance in the 2020 election that would suggest that Biden shouldn't have won. That's what a leftist could say. Instead, what do they tell you? It was the most secure election ever, and you can't question it. You will be censored off social media, and if you question it, then you're an insurrectionist. So you can't, 9/11 you couldn't question. You can't question the 2020 election. You couldn't question the COVID story. Or you wanted grandma to die. Or you were a bigot if you suggested it could have came from a lab. And they literally censored you for this. And the government was involved in the censorship. You can't question the January 6th as an insurrection narrative. If evidence comes out, like let's just say hypothetically, evidence would come out that it was the FBI that planted those pipe bombs, January 6th. What's that do to everything that's followed? All the authoritarianism, all the censorship of people questioning the election in 2020, all of the people that were locked up, the treating MAGA people like they're domestic terrorists, all of that falls. And so they have to staunchly support that narrative till the end. It doesn't matter. And that's where the cognitive dissonance comes in. It doesn't matter if you could show evidence. It's like, but wait a minute. Look at how incredibly fishy this looks. Why is it that all this, like, here's something I brought up the other day, and Thomas Massie, who I think is the best congressman in Washington at this point, he liked my post about it. Massey's interviewing Benny Thompson, who's the head of the January 6th committee, and he's talking about the January 6th pipe bomb. Now, regardless of what you think about January 6th being an insurrection or not, serious things did occur, the most serious of which was the potential for pipe bombs. That's serious. That really is serious. And so that should be the primary focus, if not one of the top focuses of the January 6th committee. Benny Thompson knew nothing. The guy who's in charge of the committee. Oh, I don't know the guy that found it. Oh, I didn't know Kamala Harris was there. Oh, I didn't know they deleted the text messages under Mayorkas. He knew nothing. Now, this is a guy who's on national TV that's getting producers from ABC to spin a narrative to the American people how this was the most serious day in America since Pearl Harbor, and yet he knows nothing about the most. So when you bring this up to the lefties, they have cognitive dissonance. They're just like, oh, right, like it's this giant conspiracy. Well, I'm not even saying that. Even if I don't think it's a giant conspiracy, surely you would want these people held accountable that are supposedly investigating it and have dropped the ball on the most important issue. And that's exactly what you run in. It's the same with 9/11. If you try to get into the actual details and try to get into the science of it, which I haven't done, so I'm taking you at face value for you saying the research that you've done. But the problem is you will just out of hand be dismissed. No one's going to look at that from the establishment point of view, from the people in leadership and say, yeah, let's look at that. For me, the moment you had for me, what it was Waco. When I heard what happened at Waco, it was this moment when I saw the clip. This is so hard to talk about. It kills me every time. They put tear gas into that house knowing that there were children in there. When the bodies were found after the fires had died down, the kids didn't die of fire. What they died of was they were in a pantry huddled together, and the tear gas acted as strychnine, which killed them in one of the most painful ways possible by snapping their muscles tightened so much it snapped their bones. One of the cruelest deaths you can imagine. And so when asked about this, when the FBI was asked about this, why did you do this? Why did you put that much tear gas in there knowing that it would torture children? Their response was, we thought if we harmed the children, the parents would release them. And for me, that statement, how could I ever trust this government again? That is one of the most monstrous, like biblically evil things that I have ever heard. And we just accept it as a society. Oh, well, mistakes were made, moving on. So that was my moment.
Yeah, I think for my dad, it was the Kennedy assassination and like the follow-up. Because when I talked to him about 9/11 and explaining like the near free fall speed the buildings come down, and he's like, he remembers the Kennedy assassination and how they pinned it all on Oswald, and he's like, okay, yeah. He would always repeat that what is it? Ronald Reagan quote: "The scariest thing, some of the scariest words you can hear. I'm here from the government, and I'm here to help."
Right.
Which is nice because they watch MSNBC. He tends to watch it and he'll take the narrative at face value and then repeat it. And unless there's some counter evidence presented, he'll go with what he's told. But also he's got that skeptical mind. So there are ways to kind of ease people out of, or at least like be like, remember, not everything that you're told is real. But so what I'm concerned, like, there's obviously this new world order. George Bush Sr. mentioned it in the 90s. He's like, we're going to create a new world order, the liberal economic order, which was created in 1949 with the American-led economics, rules-based economy, American military bases, NATO, all that crap. It's the time of that is coming to an end, and they want to, morph the world's governance into this new world order that's like a corporate global governance. But what's the problem in the United States? Like, if we're going to do that, well, firstly, why don't they? Well, they don't just tell people, because people be like, no, fuck no. We want the United States government. The American country is better. The American Constitution is supreme. But like, is the government, to the best of your knowledge, are the people in the U.S. government down with this transformation? Or are they just like closing their eyes and going, nah, until it's done? And then like, why did they put all those people in prison for January 6th for trespassing, or holding them without charge or trial? Why are they doing that? Is it just because they truly think that Trump and his support is a wrench in the gears of the transformation? Or are they like that? Maybe that's at the very top behind closed doors, and then all the rest are like useful idiots that are just like trying to get a paycheck. I mean, what do you surmise?
Yeah, I think that I think it's a mistake to think that it's monolithic. I think there are different tiers of people and people that believe it. For example, let's just take the idea of globalism. Let's envision a world with no national boundaries. You could be a very moral person and embrace that system. You could say, I think things like World War I and World War II were when great powers and great nations were fighting each other. And if we eroded those nations, then we wouldn't have those same sort of power struggles. Now, I would say that that's erroneous, because we'd still find reasons to have disputes and still find reasons to have wars. But nonetheless, I don't think that makes you an immoral person for having it. What I will say is, I think, as someone who leans libertarian, what happens is you have your best interest at heart more than anyone else, and your family has your best interest. And the further you get away from that, your local government cares more about you and knows more about you. Your state government knows a little less than the local. Your national knows a little less, and a global would know next to nothing, right? And the people that are running this system that would be in charge are not benevolent people. They're people that are doing it because they think they're better than you. They look at you as just ants to work for them. You're just eaters. And as long as your labor is important to them and it helps them, then they'll support it. But that's not everyone. That's not your local congressman, state. I don't know what state you're in, but say, you're in a little district in, your state, and there's a person at your state Congress that's a Democrat. I'm not saying they're sitting there like, yes, I too am involved in this global world order. They believe that messaging. And I talked to you a little on this space about this, even though I don't view it as a left-right problem. I don't. I think that what's happening is those that are nefarious, that are pushing at the top levels for this globalist structure, they have embraced the rhetoric of the left because they realize it gives them the unprecedented capacity to achieve their goals. And the reason is because the left increasingly is looking at things as if they are morally superior to those they disagree with. They're the caring mother. The left's archetype is saying, I'm a mom who cares about all the people that need my help and need me to be a mom. And like a mother bear that would viciously attack an outsider to protect their children. That's how I look at the world. So they view things through the lens of oppressed versus oppressors, and they say that anything is justified against the oppressors. That's where the cognitive dissonance comes in. I could have debate. I did it last night. Someone I consider an intelligent person who's a lawyer. I've had a lot of debates, probably hundreds of hours of debates about all sorts of issues. We looked at the Jabal Bowman tape, where Jabal Bowman, if you remember, pulled a fire alarm, right? And this person, before the video came out, I argued with this person, said it's nonsense. He pulled that alarm to cause a delay, not to get out of door. He disagreed with me. Then the video evidence comes out. That's it. Debate over, right? No. He still says, no, I still think it's most likely. We have video evidence that shows he pulled the alarm and never even went to the door. Never went back to the door. It doesn't matter. We have evidence that Bowman said to the police, I pulled the alarm and I didn't intend for it to go off. Now, the person I was debating said, I've had that discussion many times. Clearly, he intended the alarm to go off. I said, okay, he lied to police then, right? Well, no, because when he says, no, I didn't intend it to go off, I assume he means yes. And it's like, what's rooted in that is they have believed the narrative that their opposition, in this individual's case, Trump, and populism and the MAGA movement is so evil that they either consciously or unconsciously justify any amount of double standards to go after him. And you could hear it when you hear a lot of these people talk. Like they'll say, wouldn't you have stopped Hitler before he came into power? What they're really saying is anything is justified. And then they'll gaslight you. They'll tell you that this is how you get the same people that have told you for 3 years, there's no border crisis. What are you talking about? Border crisis? You're a racist to even suggest it. And now they're out there this week going, of course there's a border crisis and Biden wants to solve it. It's all Trump's fault because he doesn't want this terrible bill. And and the average person, like even those that are like an AOC or something, she's a true believer. She believes in the progressive cause. She believes that the oppressed need to be protected at any cost, and the ends justify the means. And so that's how you result in this. Why are January 6 people being detained for what just is petty misdemeanors that we saw all summer in 2020 with the summer of riots of George Floyd occurred? Well, because the people in charge see value in that for their globalist agenda, and the people underneath them that do have cultural and political power look at them as evil Nazi white supremacists that were supporting an insurrection. And so to hell with them. That's how it happens.
Who do you think, when you said the people in charge, is it an American? Because I imagine it's not an American coup attempt. It's more of a global corporate thing. But I mean, have you pinpointed people, or just in your opinion, are there people that you've considered might be ringleading this? I would imagine even that they're behind that their names are not public, like the real people. But I don't know. What have you come up with?
So I don't know that I don't view this as necessary. I'm not discounting this, right? But I'm not talking about like Skull and Bones and John Kerry and George Bush both drank blood out of human skulls and sat in this smoky room and came up with these plans. I think it's not even necessarily a stated plan. I think when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about the leaders of, like, a person like Bill Gates would come to mind. And I'm not saying this as if Bill Gates is this guy that's nefariously wearing a robe or something. I'm saying people that are in charge, that are billionaires, that are basically have the capacity themselves to be what we would once consider the strength of countries. Like someone like Bill Gates, or even you could say someone like Elon Musk or George Soros, they have the financial ability to operate as if many countries in the world operate. And people like that have so much cultural and political influence, those are the people I'm talking about. So I talk oftentimes about institutions in our country and how they're all in on this corruption and they're paying lip service to the causes of the left. So institutions in this country that I talk about would be like the mainstream media, academia, the entertainment industry, right? Our political, social media in Silicon Valley. All of them are pushing in the same direction and they have massive influence over our culture. What are the institutions in the United States that you would consider that have more of a conservative leaning? You might say the church, but it's increasingly becoming more progressive, right? Other than that, there's not a lot of cultural influence. Now, there are enclaves within those groups that I talked about that are pushing back the other way, but overwhelmingly, they're going in one direction. And I think the people at the tops of those institutions, like the people at the tops of academia, the people at the tops of Silicon Valley or the CEOs of large corporations, people at the top of our military-industrial complex, they have both spoken and unspoken agendas where they favor this form of globalism. So I don't look at it like, I'm not looking at it like, well, there's this 12 people. And if, again, I would never advocate political violence. I'm not saying it. But let's say we would say, well, they were all in Doha on a boat and it sank and they all passed away tragically. Oh, that means it's all over. No. It's not something that needs to be said. It's these people understand this is what's best for us to consolidate more power. And as we consolidate more power, that's better for us. And oh, by the way, it would be better for the world as well. It's basically a death cult. Like they're calling for depopulation. They want birth rates to be declining. That's what they want because they no longer need you. That's the truth.
Yeah, it's actually, as far as I can tell, it's not that they want to they don't want less humans. They want to slow the growth rate of humanity. So the word depopulation is actually a misnomer. It would be like whatever that means, to slow the growth.
Well, it did.
Funny enough, retardation.
You talk to Alex Jones about the Georgia Guidestones and all that stuff. It suggests that they only want what, like 250 million people. Something.
Yeah,
like that.
That's true. That did exist.
But what I'm saying is, like, I think this is so. A lot of my friends are in the truck driving industry, right? And it's insane what they deal with. Even like take away this grand scheme of thing and look at a micro level of people like this. Rural Pennsylvania, busted your ass your whole life. You're damn near 60. Your back's given out, and yet still you're doing a really physically laborious job. Truck driver, loading stuff onto the truck, driving 8-10 hours a day. More and more, they're making it more onerous on you. Now you have to have these e-logs, and they put governors on your engine that'll shut off if you drive more than 8 hours, and blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, illegal immigrants that are driving, or people that are coming from Mexico that are they're driving these like jalopy trucks that wouldn't even pass inspection in the United States, and they don't have to go through any of these arduous regulations. The regulations get worse and worse. It becomes more and more difficult. Their livelihood's going down and down. They're trying to work second jobs. They're working till they're 70, 80. Like, what does depopulation, what's this narrative have to do with them? I think they're in a unique position because their labor is still needed right now. Now, let's fast forward 50 years that we have all automated trucking. Do you think they're going to give two hoots about the 60-year-old truck driver? You think they're going to care at all? Oh, he's raising his voice and says, I'm going to organize a protest. So what, dude? You have nothing to offer us. We don't care. Go ahead and protest. What are you going to do? Shut up. If you want your food, you're going to shut up and you're going to agree with us. Or we'll shut off your bank account. How about that? And so when I see depopulation, I literally think they want less people. I think they view people as a different species than them, the average person. And that species is useful so far as they're doing labor and things that increase the livelihood of these people that view themselves as the elites. But once you're no longer needed, if automation, for example, makes what you do to benefit them unnecessary, they don't care. They're not going to actively, I don't think that it's nefarious that most of them would be like, we're actually going to, physically remove you from existence. That's not what I'm saying necessarily. But that's why they're encouraging the slowing of the growth, because inevitably they're looking and saying, well, we won't have to go through, gulags and, removing people from existence if we just convince enough people, don't procreate. There's, there's all that could go in a lot of different rabbit holes, but I think that some of the things they do is pushing sort of, values, cultural values that are not preferring children and families. They're trying to erode families and the importance of fatherhood and the importance of motherhood, and to have more of an existence about materialism. They're encouraging things like abortion. So I think all of that is in the same plan, and they're particularly targeting these in areas such as the European world and the United States in order to erode national pride, because as I said before, they view that as the largest stumbling block to achieving their globalist system. And so they could erode national identity by convincing people to not procreate and then saying, oh, we're not having enough kids, so we have to import labor from the third world. And then once that happens enough, it changes the identity of a country, and they'll say, well, what is the United States?
You mentioned like the consideration that we're different species, that within humanity there's actually subspecies. Like, and I tend to think that if not at the moment, we had Neanderthals and Homo sapiens that coexisted for a long time until, in my opinion, the Homo sapiens eradicated the Neanderthals in some genocidal war and then just never wrote about it and erased them from the history books. Who knows? Could have been a comet, could have been a conflagration of all of the above. But like, maybe where there's Homo sapien and Homo technus, people are evolving into putting chips in their bodies, neural nets, where that'll be another species. But like, and then I'm thinking about like leaders and followers and the plebs in the Roman era, the plebs and the aristocrats or whatever. Like, is it that some small groups of humans historically have had access to nutrition, so their children were stronger and taller and smarter, and then they maintain the wealth within their families, within their tribes, then their cities and their communities and their countries and their nations and their religions, and that there truly are two types of human. There is a brilliant human, a thinking man, and then there's the follower, the one that believes what it's told. And is that true? Do you see that dichotomy?
Yeah, there sort of is, right? And this gets into difficult conversations such as like IQ and things like that are verboten that we can't talk about. And certainly there are people that use these sorts of conversations for nefarious reasons. I'm not one of them. I do think that that's true. It's very tenuous, right? Like one of the lessons that my dad and my grandfather taught me was that I'm not better than anyone and no one's better than me. Now, that's literally not true. For example, I'm better than a serial killer, right? Obviously. But the theme of that is there are different ways to look at what makes you a person of value, right? Maybe it's you're very talented at a particular hierarchy, your career, or you're very talented entertainer and you entertain millions of people. I saw this video of Tracy Chapman. I'm not a big Grammys fan, but man, I've always been a Tracy Chapman fan. Like, you listen to that song, you get goosebumps. Like, that's a value. That adds value to people's lives. That's important, right? I happen to be someone that was, I guess, of reasonable intelligence that went off and was a really good policy debater. And in the style debate I did, I went to Clarion University. You've never heard of that. It's a state school. I was the first person from our school, me and my partner, to ever make it to qualify for the National Debate Tournament. It's basically the NCAA basketball tournament of debate tournaments. You're debating Harvard. You're debating the military academy. You're debating Yale. Like, there are no divisions. If you play football and you go to Clarion University, you ain't playing Alabama. Right? And so I went there and people could say, wow, you did really good at that. You're a really smart person. Dude, I couldn't change my oil to change my life. Some of the smartest people I know are people that didn't graduate ninth grade. What are they literally smart? Do they have a high IQ? No. But there are things that their life adds that is valuable. There's wisdom. There's things that are beyond a measure. There are people, if you even get out of that conversation, there are leaders and there are followers. It's difficult to have a society. It's a miracle that we have it. But part of having a society means that there has to be a place for everyone. As long as those people are making conscious contributions, if they're able to try to increase some metric of society. So I'm not talking about useless people that just want to sit in their basement and say, I believe in communism. I deserve as much as everyone else. But we did have a system. Like, I'll give you an example. I don't know if you could, if you've ever seen, if you come to a rural, you're in West Virginia, right?
Yeah, I'm from Ohio, Northeast Ohio,
okay,
Akron.
Yep. Okay, Akron. I've been there many times, right? Like, in where I'm at, Sunday football was like a holiday. Like, you go to the bar. I used to bartend. It was like you would see people that work their fingers to the bone for $7.50 an hour come in to drink cheap draft beers and sit there like a maniac and cheer on the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? Same in Ohio with the Browns. I've seen it there too, right? They would do that. And they were happy with that arrangement. They were. They didn't upset the apple cart and say, we need to overthrow society because of this. By most metrics, you would look at it and say, man, you got a bad lot, man. You probably were born without the best nutrition. You probably had a family that, wasn't in the best situation. Maybe you went to jail young because you made a bad decision. And now you're stuck working a job that's going to break your body down before it should. And you're making almost no wage. And yet you're happy. And yet here you are on the weekend hanging out with your friends and you're happy. And the truth is, you will never have a society where everyone is equally talented and equally intelligent and equally leaders. It's just not going to happen. What we need is a society that understands those people that are working towards the betterment of their society and civilization. They deserve to be looked after and to have their feelings heard as well. But it doesn't mean that we're all leaders. What I see is those people that are what I would consider the sort of globalist establishment types, they don't look at it that way. They look at it as these people, we are better than them. And in many ways they are. They're better than them financially, certainly. They're probably better than them nutritionally. They're probably grown up in a more psychologically sound environment. They had two parents, blah, 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 But they look at these people as inferior, as not worth celebrating. And I reject that wholeheartedly. That, to me, is my primary reason for doing what I do. Because I see these people, the guy that, the plumber you're calling, the guy that's fixing the brakes in your car, as some of the greatest people that allow all the other people to do the things that they make, that allow the scientists to make the achievements that they're making, that allow the great entertainers to make the achievements that they're doing. And so I agree with you. It's difficult. It's hard to say that. It's hard to say. There are people that are just, and it's not controversial though. I mean, take IQ and anything out of it. Some people are born with spina bifida. Some people are born with Down syndrome. My job, you know what my job is? My job is I work home health care with adults with developmental disabilities. That's my job. I deal with people with autism every day. That's what I do at work. They were born in a situation that, through no control of their own, they're starting a leg down. And we try to make their lives as meaningful as possible and to help them achieve the goals that they want. But it's just erroneous to say we're all born equal and that there aren't some people that have, biological advantages over other people. And that goes all the way up to societal advantages and IQ advantages, intelligent advantages, personality advantages like leadership.
You were saying that like some people, the people that contribute to society, the people that are making life better, making the world better, like deserve support. And that on its face, I fully agree. But then, so Yuval Noah Harari, he's a guy that works with the World Economic Forum. He's kind of like, I don't know if he's the number 2 guy at the World Economic Forum with Klaus Schwab, but he's one of the top guys, Yuval. He's been quoted as referring to people as useless eaters. Mm-hmm. And I think he's talking about people that go work a 9 to 5 that is like insurance, something that an AI is going to automate eventually, become like, do we really need people doing this? So maybe he's flipping burgers, something that a robot and AI is going to automate. And then that's all they do. And they come home, they drink beer, they watch TV, they go to bed. They do nothing culturally other than fill a rote task, and then they consume, and then they repeat. He's referring to those people as useless. Now, I don't know if he phrased it a little harshly. It's a very utilitarian thing. You can always harvest people's body heat for piezoelectricity if you get the right technology in order. So no one's truly useless. But like, maybe they're concerned that they're actually a potential danger, people like that, because if the power goes out, those are the people that are going to be like, power to the people, tell me what to do. And then the first cult leader that comes along is like, that way. All these people are just like, I need my beer, I need my normalcy, I'll do whatever you say. And they're concerned about those people staging some sort of idiotic revolt. So they want to sedate them and put them like in pods and put them in pharmaceutical psychoactives on VR so that they're just like truly pacified.
That's absolutely true. And you want to hear the worst part about that? Their fears are correct. If the reason that people are so placated right now is because they're comfortable. I mean, we have a problem. You probably look by me. I'm not a very wealthy person. I ain't missing many meals. We have a problem with obesity with people that are poor in this country. That's not the normalcy in human history. When you had societies where there were people that were on the lower rungs of society, they were struggling to find food to eat. We're so well off in this country that we have the opposite problem, right? Like, so we, by many ways, we are, despite all of the problems I'll talk about of society, and there are nightmares beyond our comprehension, as the quote says, that we may be facing and that we're starting to face, right? But overarchingly, human history is that of suffering and hardship, and we are lucky to be alive in the time that we are. We absolutely are. But if the chips really went down, if things like, if an EMP goes off and people start going nuts, right? The people that are the institutional leaders right now that have governed in a way of contempt for the average Joe Schmo working in rural areas, they would have a right to fear those people. Because at that point, people would say, well, if I'm starving and it's because of these leadership and these people and what they did, and they're living a life of luxury while I'm starving, I refuse to accept that. And I'm going to do something about it. And so they're right. If you are, a baron that's hoarding all of the treasures of your society, part of you says we have to keep the people placated, because if we don't, they'll realize, oh boy, that guy's holding all the treasures and making our lives worse. So I don't begrudge them from saying that. What I would really say is try to be a human being and have compassion for the people that have made your way of life applicable. And it's one of the things that's difficult, because like when I saw that trucker strike in Canada, one of the first things that my mind went to was, what if this was 30 years from now? What if we have enough automated and I don't know. I don't look in this stuff maybe as much as someone like you. I don't know how far we are away from the majority of our trucking and delivery services to be automated. But say we're in that society 30 years from now, what is the bargaining power that these people have at that point? If all the truckers say we're not going to work today, they're like, that's okay, the drones are. We'll be fine. We don't need you anymore. And you can see the utter contempt, the learn to code thing. Well, we're putting coal miners out of business. There is a place for saying, look, I think the climate change stuff's way out of, it's a tool that's used, it's over-exaggerated, and it's basically a farce. But let's say you believe that, right? And you'd say, look, we're so sorry, but because of the way our society's going, if we allow you to keep working, it's going to harm the environment, which will lead to people dying. So we're going to have to transition you to some other kind of job. That's one way to handle it. Fuck you, redneck, learn to code. That's another. And that's the approach they took. The utter contempt. And then as soon as it's turned on them, and people are being laid off at the LA Times, have some compassion. What are you doing? My goodness, do you know how much the entertainment industry was harmed by the COVID lockdowns? Wasn't that terrible? Dude, the entertainment industry, you guys still had money to eat. I knew people that were losing their homes. I knew people that were dying. Not just because of COVID or because of the vaccines or because of things related to that, but dying because they couldn't get therapies and surgeries and stuff like that for unrelated medical conditions because the lockdowns were so harsh. And so the contempt, they ask us to treat them with reverence. The best way I could put it, and I've tried to explain this to people, imagine being someone working a 9 to 5 for $12 an hour, and all you want to do is buy a jersey for a football star and go to the bar on Sunday and watch that football star. And then you get there and you hear that star going, the people that are the problem with this country is this guy right there watching me with my jersey on. He has privilege. That's the problem. Like, that's where we're at as a society. The one thing, the little enjoyments that people had, just basically wanting to be left alone and to work hard and to have lives that maybe you wouldn't think are great, or maybe the people at Davos wouldn't think are great, or maybe I wouldn't think were great, but they're still living their lives. And we said, that's not enough. We have to take more from those people.
It's like this, I think what keeps ringing in my head is at any cost, this idea that we're going to make the world better at any cost. We're going to stop the villain at any cost. And like, I don't think people really know what that means if they're saying that, or if they're even considering like that evil is a viable tool towards the goal, because like at any cost, this is my same thing at like make America great at any cost. Like, what is the opportunity cost of making America? Are we going to increase our value by 5%, but decrease the value of everyone else by 20%? Because that's not a good equation.
It's difficult.
It might make.
You're absolutely right. Like, one of the things I say that we should basically be non-interventionist. My policy on America is we should not be meddling in the affairs of other countries. However, we should not intentionally be making other countries worse to enrich ourselves. That's difficult. There are people like, look, a lot of Trump supporters watch me, probably watch you, right? Trump said we go in there, we should take their oil. Is that the society we want? Is that what we're really prepared to do? You know, if people wonder what any cost means, the best that have given chills up my spine that to me illustrated is read the book The Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Look at what happened in the Soviet Union. Look at how bad things got. People hear about the Holodomor. You know, the Holodomor, they had signs. 50 million Ukrainians starved because they started to say, and it starts out of compassion. That's what makes it so nefarious. Imagine that you're a poor worker in some, Ukrainian town during the Soviet Union, and you're barely getting by, and all of a sudden these Bolsheviks come in and they're like, why is that guy eating better than you? Well, he owns the farm. Well, why should he own it? Don't you work hard? Yeah, I do work hard. Well, that's garbage. That guy shouldn't own that farm. You guys should own that farm. Let's get him out of here. So they killed those kulaks, or they sent them to Siberia, and then what happened? Well, out of this place of compassion and trying to work with the oppressed, turns out those people didn't know how to run the farms. And 5 million Ukrainians starved to death. They had signs up that said things like, no matter how hungry you are, don't eat your children. That's hell on earth that I can't imagine. I could watch a horror movie. I could read about it. But I know that I'm not really processing what that means. When I read what the criminal code was in the Gulag Archipelago of the Soviet Union, how people were literally being sentenced to 10 years in a gulag for anti-Soviet agitation because your neighbor was jealous of your wife, and so they came into your house and the picture of Stalin you had hanging up in the kitchen, it was slightly askew. Well, you askewed it on purpose. That was a political statement. 10 years. That actually happened, and it happened hundreds of thousands of times. That happened, and it all started from a place of, but we have to look out for the little guy. And so when people say at any cost, they're literally, this is what blew my mind. They're literally, Solzhenitsyn's interviewing people that are talking about how they got railroaded. Their wives were killed or their husbands were killed, and they've been in a gulag for 20 years. And they're still saying, but it's still for the good of the country. They messed up just with me. Everyone else that's here deserves it. That's how insidious at any cost is. And they mean it.
Yeah, I don't know what the cost, what cost people are willing to incur, both from the global order that wants this new world banking order. I don't know how it will look. Like, what's the the opportunity cost they're willing, what's the fodder they're willing to see. And then same with the people that want the America first thing, where it's like non-intervention. I want global ties out of this. I just don't think that we can get the globalism out. I kind of feel like the snowball's about 3/4 of the way down the hill, and it's like, are you going to plug your brain in or not at this point?
You're partially right. Like, I think we're so interconnected at this point that it's not like in, the 1700s where you could be like, we're just going to excommunicado from like Spain. You can't really do that. By the way, it's one of the things that makes selling propaganda more difficult now. Imagine where we would be with the Ukraine situation, the Russia-Ukraine war, if we didn't have the internet. If it was just the old days of, 1990, and we just every day had the president going on saying how evil Putin was, and there wasn't any pushback. People saying, by the way, I'm not saying Putin's a good guy or anything like that. I'm just saying, so yeah, I mean, there is a question. When you talk about, like, one other thing, maybe you'll find this interesting. I have this friend, really smart, was a former debater, arguably better than me, really smart guy. I did a show with him once. We talked about climate change. And he said, we need to stop fossil fuel production and usage at any cost. That's the word he used. And I was like, well, let's go through with this. Why do you think? And I'll try to give the Cliff Notes version as fast as possible. But he said if we didn't end fossil fuel use within 10 or 15 years, within 100 years, all humans would be dead. That was his prediction. So it's the biggest crisis humanity's ever faced. We need to end fossil fuels. And so I was like, well, let's go through it. Let's say the United States eliminates tomorrow. Why would China eliminate? Well, I don't know. I guess, like, why would India eliminate? India's life expectancy in the past 30 years has gone up tremendously because they're just getting access to fuels, right? It's dirty fuel, but it's fuel, and it's increasing their quality of life immensely. So we're going to tell them, sorry, you got to go back to the old ways. That's what we're going to do. Are you willing to go to war with China? And he's basically like, yeah, I'm willing to go to war with China. We went through a bunch of scenarios, and basically he predicted conservatively the policies he would advocate for would kill 3 billion people. 3 billion. In order to save humanity. And the last question I asked him was, how sure are you that you're right about the climate change stuff? And he said, about 40%. And it's like, you're advocating killing 3 billion people because you're slightly less than half confident if we don't, the whole world will die. Now, that's not a place of evil. That's a place of arrogance and indoctrination of this at any cost. There is this big threat out there, and we have to solve it at any... Now apply that to Donald Trump being elected. I had this situation happen. I had this guy call in. It's very interesting. He seemed like a nice gentleman. We're talking. He was in the chat, so he calls in my show. We're talking, seemed pleasant, telling some anecdotes. And then all of a sudden the name Trump comes up. You could feel him change. You could feel the visceral hatred. And I hate Trump. And he wanted to talk about the Arizona election on it. So we start going through some of it. And he goes, I don't care. Count the votes, count the votes, count the votes. Trump lost, Trump lost. I said, let's just cut down to brass tacks, sir. I said, if you were working in that election office in Arizona, and you know that Trump's Hitler, right? Yep. And you see that Trump's going to win the election unless you do something. Would you have cheated? And he's like, yeah, I would. It's worth it because at any cost, we must prevent this maniacal person from winning. And we're supposed to believe that nothing happened. No, the people that tell us that Trump's literally Hitler, that he was going to lock up all gay people, he was going to kick all black people out of the country. But no, none of them would do anything nefarious. They wouldn't do that. And that's what I'm saying. This is... It's not unique to the left, but it's overwhelmingly more prevalent on the left, where these people say at any cost. There are people in the MAGA movement that do the same. And what I'm worried about is I think people like me and you, Ian, are sort of a buffer. I don't want to see the pendulum swing back where the right says, well, the only chance we have to fight is to treat the left the exact same way. Now we have to at any cost. If that means jailing them and that means censoring them, so be it. We'll do the same. If that means illegally using FISA warrants to spy on presidents that we don't like, fine, so be it. Like, I don't want it to get to that place. And so I'm trying to have cooler heads prevail to tell people, like, there are room for these discussions. There's room for political disagreements, but we have to have ground rules. You can't say it's okay to punch a Nazi. Why? Because the next sentence you'll say is, and you're a Nazi, Rob, and then you'll punch me. And if the ground rules don't say, no, we can't use political violence, you can't punch the people you disagree with politically, then that means that debate is no longer something that's possible. And once debate's not possible, where are we left? Well, we're just hostile enemies. And at any cost, I have to beat my enemy. And so it's bleak in that sense. It really is. And it's bleak in the sense that you hear people say this and they don't think through the implications. And then you take a step back and you're like, who is this person I'm talking to? Oh, it's my college roommate for 4 years. Someone that, we've had great times with. We know each other. We know we're both good people. How did we get here? And it's because of what I see is this cultural and the slow coup that you called it, this constant drumbeat of cultural influence, of political influence, constantly in every institution in our country and in the Western world, constantly pushing the same messages. These people are evil. This is what makes you a good person. The progressive agenda is correct. You're evil if you disagree with us. You're racist if you disagree with us. Blah, 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 blah. Don't look at the facts. We shouldn't platform people. Don't leave people speak that disagree with you. Don't leave Tucker Carlson talk to Vladimir Putin. All of this stuff, constantly this agenda. It's so difficult to overcome that. And, it's what I try to do, but.
Yeah, it's like if I'm wargaming it, I'm thinking of metaphors of like art of war type stuff. The at any cost methodologies like scorched earth policy, like the worst case scenario in war, or one of the worst case scenarios, is that you have to retreat from your city that's being invaded. You're going to lose the city to the enemy. They're going to take it. And you end up burning the city to the ground because you don't want the enemy to be able to resupply and set up shop in that city. You completely torch everything and level it to zero. Now that can work in a defensive, desperate move, but it is not a sustainable military tactic. If every side constantly scorches every city, no one wins. Everyone ends up on a heap of steaming pile of hell.
Well,
and so the same with debate and the same with behavior in society. It can happen once in a while. The whole, like, they did it in 2018, 19. They're like, I will cheat to make sure the guy I hate doesn't get it. But we cannot continue that policy. We can't keep scorching the earth.
And
we've got to like.
What happens is some people have something to lose and others don't. And if you have something to lose, you can have rational discussions with people, right? I'm not making this up. I have talked to communists and socialists. And I've said, no, I talk about a lot of bleak stuff. And yet you just heard me say, we live in one of the best times to be alive ever, right? It's true. We do. I've talked to these socialists that have told me with a straight face, to live in the United States today is literally hell on earth. It has never been worse. That's what these socialists say. And if they feel that way, if they truly feel that way, and it's like, it can't get any worse, what would they be willing to do? I have a child, right? I'm not willing, no matter what I talk about politically, I care deeply about this country. I care deeply about our society, but I care for my family first. I care for my son and my wife more than any of that. I'm not going to, at this point, risk that, even if I think that it would be something, unless it becomes a point of no return that I have no choice but to do so. But if you're someone that doesn't have a family and doesn't have friendships and feels that this world's just left you behind, and you're hearing all these messages, all cultures going in the same direction, basically, you turn on your favorite music artists and they're telling you the same progressive agenda, and you turn on the late night comedy shows and they're telling you, and you turn on the news and they're all telling you, like, at some point you're willing to say, absolutely, if that means, and you can see how this plays out in like real, this isn't a metaphor, this plays out in real world things. You're on a jury and some woman says, yeah, I think Trump, assaulted me in a department store in public 30 years ago. I don't remember any of the details except the dress I had on. I remember the specific dress. Oh, what's that? That dress wasn't invented until 4 years afterwards. Oh, well, nonetheless, he did this. And on the jury, you're like, guilty. Yeah. Because you're not looking at it like, well, wait a minute. I have something to lose in that if this is a tit for tat and society goes in this direction, we're not going to like where this goes.
It's interesting. You said family, and your family is the most important part of your equation. And then what family, where that word comes from, familiar, what you're familiar with. People have no parents. They have no siblings. What are they familiar with? Maybe it's Jimmy Kimmel. Maybe it's the mass media. Maybe it's the crowd that's saying, go that way. This culture is better. Maybe that's what they become familiar with and hence becomes their family. And that's the thing that they're willing to prioritize, is what they're familiar with.
And what's scary is you could see it happening. So you're like, you might think, of course, at Berkeley, at Harvard, in inner city, neighborhoods where people are going to private schools. So I went to a school, the high school I went to, small rural school. I have a sister that's 20 years younger than me. They, for whatever reason, Pittsburgh decided to send a news crew out to 3 small schools and do mock elections. So they did it in 2016. And Trump won in a landslide in the school that I went to high school with. And it makes sense. Everybody's chewing Copenhagen, driving 4-wheelers, hunting for bucks on the weekend. It's what you expect Trump country to look like. In 2020, they went for Biden. And my sister, I love my sister, and she's part of that group that is more progressive. And I tried to talk about her in a non-controversial way. I'm not trying to argue with her. I'm just trying to learn and say what's going on. Non-binary people at the school, through the roof. all of a sudden all of this progressive rhetoric and stuff that I would have thought was impossible even 4 years prior to that. And this little, there it is, right in my face. And it's like, she still has a family, right? She still has all of us. But there's also all of these other influences. And the more and more we increase technology, again, technology is so great and it can be used for such good, but it also can become a very important part of someone's life, particularly someone who is isolated from a lot of social situations, particularly children. And when everything on that device is telling you to go in one direction, it's hard not to do it. And so even in, I see the alarm bells because I see in even areas like I'm at. And what does that mean if we all have this monolithic thought that people are told that they're virtuous, and part of your virtue is never hearing what your opponents say and treating them like basically orcs out of Lord of the Ring. They're just evil people that need to be dealt with. And sadly, that's where I see things going.
Yeah, it's important to remember that the best way to win a war is to make your enemy your friend. I think Abe Lincoln even said that. But like, man, if you've ever played a video game where there's like a bunch of different factions fighting, if you can get one of those enemy factions to become your ally, not only do you have one less enemy, you have one more ally. Exactly. You've severely imbalanced the situation in your favor if you can make your enemy your friend, which is why I think diplomacy is a key part of the puzzle for any conflict. Even now with Russia and the United States, like if we could ally and even evolve into this new world order collectively, like with, free speech at the center, that would be so badass. And I wonder why. Well, I don't want to say that it hasn't been. There probably are moves to make it happen. It's just not as publicized on the TV. I got a question. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say, real quick, think tactically, like on a more micro level, like the DeSantis-Trump business, right? I don't understand. Once Trump's team knew that DeSantis wasn't going to win, it was going to be Trump. Like, dude, I'm out there doing you would not believe the podcast I'm going on. As someone who's supporting Trump going into this election, I would have chosen DeSantis over Trump. Trump wins, no problem. It's got my support 100%, right? No problem. I'm going on to these DeSantis spaces on X and places like that. They're unhinged. They're absolutely unhinged. They are so mad because some random Trump influencer, Cat Turd, said something mean about me on X. Okay, but don't you believe that Biden's driving us into a potential World War III? I don't care. I won't vote for who Cat Turd tells me to vote for. And I see this where I'm like, if we're so, the establishment's doing such a good job of dividing us even amongst ourselves. Occupy Wall Street and the Tea Party agreed with 90% of the stuff that they believed. Why couldn't they come together? One's on the left, one's on the right. Both of them, they might blame different people, but they both see the same problem, right? They see this problem of these banks, these institutions that have consolidated all this wealth that don't care about the average person. They can't handle the institutions. They don't want people coming together. I always say, if it's populist versus the establishment wins by keeping us divided and ignorant. The populist wins by informing people and having people come together. And that might mean that someone that you fought viscerally for, like that person you were talking about, Stephen A. Smith. I don't like Stephen A. Smith. Stephen A. Smith said things that I think are arguably racist against white people. However, if in the context of this battle, if I could bury that hatchet and say, listen, it's more important that we take allies anywhere we can get, I think it's worth doing that. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people that would rather have the petty grudges and the personal beefs than understand how important it is to move forward as a society.
A great metaphor for that is how the Russians and the Americans and the British came together during World War II to win the war. If they had not come together, despite the differences in communism and fascism that they had, or whatever America called itself at the time, it was fascist, but it was like, they had to. It was like, let's just, the enemy of my enemy is my friend for now. And then after the war was over, they went back into their corners and they built their own things. But during that war, it was pretty apparent, like the belligerent needed to be stopped. The German war machine needed to be stopped. And like, let's come together to make sure that everything isn't lost. So I think that's kind of in global diplomacy. I'm not saying that like the global economic order is a Nazi move. It's not at all. It's some new technocratic fascist thing. And I don't even know if it needs to be stopped. I just want to make sure that we twist it in the right direction as it forms.
I agree. And it's like, again, as bleak as some of this stuff might sound that we're talking, think of the positives, right? Think of where you would be during World War II and what you thought of a German. I'm not saying the Nazis are good or anything like that, but you just knew this caricature of whatever your propagandist told you. And I don't mean German like Himmler or Hitler. I mean like the average German citizen, right? Well, the same is true today with Putin. We have this image that the propagandists are trying to push us of Russia. And yet, we could go on right now and play World of Warcraft with a Russian. We could play poker with them or play chess or go in some chat room with. It's not this hypothetical, enemy from across the world that you'll never see. You can see them in real time, right? They're not, magical people that are, living in caves and we have no communication with them. There they are. And so, although these tools can be used for division, how do you sell to people that they're all monstrous people if people could literally talk to them and make friends with them and understand we're more alike than we're different? And that happens. So they have to come up with more creative ways, right, to sell this sort of stuff. And they're desperate, and you can see how they're, the Ukraine funding, it's one of the funniest things that, you talked about, cognitive dissonance. The narratives that they're using on Ukraine, if you notice this the entire time, are completely contradictory. On one hand, they'll be like, we got to send all these billions to Ukraine. We have to send them, or they're going to, if we don't fight them over there, we'll fight them over here. The Russians are going to come into Poland, they'll come into NATO, and then we'll be in World War III. So we have to fight them over there. And then someone like me will be like, okay, but how are we making sure that money's accountable? Didn't we just in Afghanistan spend trillions of dollars and then leave with our tail between our legs and end up arming the Taliban? So how are we sure that this money will help Ukraine win? Why don't we have a peaceful resolution? And what do? They laugh at you and go, Russia's already lost. Ukraine's got it in the bag, man. What are you worried about? Come on. Russia's proved they're a paper tiger. And you're like, oh, okay, cool. Then I guess we don't need to send the money. But you have to send the money because if you don't, Russia's going to overtake the world. It's completely contradictory. And yet that's the narrative. I talked to, one of the streamers I talk to a lot, they're actually in Ukraine. They're a big supporter of Ukraine, and they're trying to report on the ground there. I talked to them a year and a half ago. They said, war's over. Russia's lost. Right? Then I do a panel with them 7 months later, and they're like, we need to send more money desperately. I'm like, you said the war was already over. Oh, when I said that, what I meant was that they weren't going to be able to take Kiev. But certainly they won't be able to ever get into Poland. Now I listen to, I turn on my television when they're trying to send money to Ukraine. There's the Biden administration and Republican leadership saying, oh, if we don't send them over there, Schumer's saying we're going to be fighting them in Poland. And yet the people that I were told were experts said there's no chance. They're a paper tiger. They can't do it. All of it's cognitive dissonance. And so the technology, they can't sell it like they maybe used to have, which would have been these evil Russians or these orc-like people and blah, blah, blah. They can't sell it that way. And so it makes them desperate. And so I do see optimism in that. I think people are waking up and, we'll see how effective it is. It's never over. It's always a battle. But yeah, I agree with you 100%. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. We have a global system, but that doesn't mean we can't still have national identity and pride and try to use that to work within that system to twist it in a direction that is beneficial for all of us. I agree with that.
It's kind of like state pride, like, and COVID shocked that out of people. Like, I'm proud to be a Floridian. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not personally a Floridian, but when I go there, I feel like I love this state. I love the laws. I love the way it's policed. I love the way the people police themselves there. And maybe if we can instantiate state pride, that will then bleed out into national pride, which goes out into the global governance. Just as state pride within a nation will create national pride within a globe. I can see that. So, like, staying strongly being proud of your local government.
Yeah, and even when I consider myself a nationalist, right, and they use nationalism as a bad word, right. I think that here's how I define in a layman's sense patriotism versus nationalism. Let's look at the family unit. I'm a husband, I have a wife, I have a son. Patriotism would be me saying, I love my family, I think they're great. Nationalism would be me saying, and I will protect my family first and foremost, right? So I might say, oh, my neighbor's kid's struggling, I have a little extra, I could give them to them. And that's fine, as long as I'm taking care of the priorities of my family first. Then we could help other families outside of it. But there is benefit to family units sticking together and taking care of their concerns and their needs first and foremost. The same's true of a nation state. It's okay for our nation to admit we exist as a collective for the people of this country. That's what we are. And that's perfectly fine. And that means as long as there are problems in this country, we shouldn't be sending billions of dollars to countries around the world. Particularly when you see the people tasked with sending that are so corrupt that they end up making the situations worse most of the time. So they'll say, oh, well, we have to arm the Mujahideen in the 70s. We have to arm them, right? And then they're going into Russia, the Soviet Union, and launching attacks. And the Soviet Union's accusing us of financing terrorism. No, we said we're not doing that. Well, we were. That's what we did. Did you ever watch, I don't know if you're a fan of the Rambo movies, Rambo 3.
I've seen the first one, yeah. No, not 3.
Oh, so the third movie, you check it out just for this, if nothing else. The plot of the third movie is that his colonel, Rambo's colonel, goes to Afghanistan to help the noble, farmers there fight against these evil Russians that are invading. And then Rambo gets sucked in and he comes to love these farmers, these Afghani farmers. That's the Taliban. That's who it is. They don't call them the Taliban, but that's it. It's literally Rambo working with these noble religious farmers of the area against the evil Russian occupation, right? And it's like, to watch that, it's so funny. That's what we did. That's what the United States, we were told that we had to send that money. And then what happens? Well, in the late 90s, we're told, oh, it's the greatest threat to us. Afghani terrorists, Islamic terrorism. But we armed them. We created them. Well, now they're the biggest threat. Now we got to go back in. And we do this over and over. We support freedom fight. We supported Saddam. Then we were told, well, we got to go fight Saddam. And so when I look at national, it's not that I don't have a bleeding heart. I think that I am amongst the 99.9% of the luckiest people that have ever been born. I have a tremendous wife. I'm relatively healthy. My son is absolutely amazing. I'm born in the greatest country in the history of the world. It's a great time to be alive. Do I think it sucks that there's someone born in Africa that's starving? Absolutely. But I can't affect change like that if I'm not taking care of my own house first. The same is true of a country. And when they do, they're not doing it because they care about the people of Afghanistan or Africa or Ukraine. They're doing it because they see a grift that helps them achieve their personal agenda. And their personal agenda doesn't give two hoots about me or you or the average person in Russia or the average person in Ukraine. And so the best check we could put on it is to say we should only be involved in issues to the best of our ability that are localized to the nation, to our country, but don't intentionally cause harm to groups outside of it, at least until we get the corruption in our government out of there. Otherwise, we just end up sending people that make the situation worse.
And unintentional harm to the environment is like, you got to keep your eye on it, at least so you can acknowledge when you created unintentional harm, because making yourself great is going to have byproduct. And if that byproduct lays waste to the surrounding nations inadvertently, you still got to take responsibility, even if it wasn't the intention.
I'll give you a quick example. This is something we talked about in debate, and I'm not getting into the actual economics of this, but just in general, how this could quickly spiral out of control. Me and you might say, we think it's bad they're starving people in Africa. You know what we should do? We should artificially lower the price, government subsidize corn in our country, then we'll send it on boats to Africa and sell the corn to them cheap to prevent them from starving. Now, that sounds good, right? As long as everyone's on board, why wouldn't that be a good thing? Great, yeah, we don't want people to starve. Everyone agrees with that, right? Well, you know what one of the unintended consequences of that is? The locals that live there that are trying to have farms and sell their crops to the other locals, now they get undercut. And so now they can't sell their corn at cost, so they have to lower the price, which means they can no longer operate the farm, which then means the people of that country are now completely dependent on handouts from the United States in order to exist. Now, that could have came from a place of compassion. We meant to do, but we didn't think about the unintended consequences. And so that's assuming that you're a person that means well. What if you're a person that doesn't mean well? What if you're Halliburton and you're like, you know what we should do? We should intentionally screw up this country so that we can get access to their fossil fuels. We get access to their minerals, right? And so that's the problem I have when I talk to all these people and they'll say, well, what about this dictator? Do you like Putin? No, I don't like Putin. Do you like Assad? No, I don't particularly. Did you like Gaddafi? No. Did you like Saddam? No. But I could point to world leaders like that all over the place that the United States isn't invading. Why is it that we've picked these select one out? And when we pick them out, all you have to do is ask yourself, is the country better off or worse off than when we went? Is Libya better off now that Gaddafi's won? No. It went from a place where it was a human right to have a house if you were an adult that had one of the highest literacy rates in Africa to now there are open-air slave markets. We put them back in medieval times. And no one cares. We're supposed to not bat an eye and just say, but this time trust the exact same people in Ukraine. And I'll tell you how the Ukraine story is going to end. You know how it'll end? Inevitably, whether it's this year, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, the United States will leave, and the people that will suffer the most are the people of Ukraine that will have lost their sons and fathers and grandchildren to this needless war that we could have done our best to have a peaceful resolution. But instead, a bunch of warmongers in the globalist system decided that it would be beneficial to them to continue to push for this war. And I'm considered to be the one that's not compassionate because I'm like, we need to have some sort of peaceful resolution.
Yeah, I'm with you on this because they just started conscripting women a few weeks ago, the daughters, the mothers, I don't know. And what I think is going to happen on top of what you're saying in 1 year, 10 years, 20 years, whatever, that global banks, BlackRock and other companies are going to go in and buy it up and fund the reconstruction and turn it into a smart country, what they call a smart country with like spying tech. You know, you walk out on the street, there's cameras everywhere that'll like see you move your mouth. If you're like taxi, this is apparently what's happening in some cities in China, these smart cities. There's so many cameras that you don't even need a device. You just walk outside and say Uber to, and then you say your destination and it can read your lips. I don't know how intricate it is. And then the car will show up to pick you up. Like it's getting to that level. This is before the brain interface.
Right. And then you got a social credit score on top of it. So if you're like, hey, I don't like what President Xi's doing today. Whoops. That gets recorded. That gets put in your file. Then all of a sudden, unbeknownst to you, you apply for a government job and you're blacklisted. Well, why? Well, we heard you say something on that street corner with your friend when you were out drinking that one night.
And there are technologies that I've been studying where like a radar, I think it's radar, can pick up your audio through walls. It doesn't, you don't like, it can see, I don't know how it works. If it's doing light through glass that can pick up the vibration of the sound and then it transmits the sound back to the base. But they can actually like, things can like hear you even if you're underground or if you're in a building. It's not like, or if you're in the wood. So yeah, that's
and
great.
Those rules will apply to you and me, but they won't apply to the elites. Just like COVID rules applied to you and me, but not to Nancy Pelosi or Gavin Newsom. That's the most nefarious thing about it.
Not at first, yeah, until the artificial intelligence is like, human is old, now new life form. I can imagine everything turning on its owner, especially the proprietary stuff. I wanted to ask you, like, we've been going for like an hour and a half. I only intended an hour, but this is great. But before we wrap, I wanted to ask you, I'm going to be doing this debate with Destiny, with Steven over the weekend on Sunday. I'm going to go to Cincinnati and we're going to do not really debate, just conversation, talk about politics and like voter integrity and all sorts of this stuff, like cleaning up your own house. Kind of like what you mentioned earlier, like take care of your nation first. And I'm looking at like the Arizona audit. This come up and I'm like, all right, if I'm going to talk about how our elections are busted, I need something to back it up. If I'm going to make a claim, I don't even want to, like, I kind of want to just be like, here's some evidence. I'm not making a claim, but just look at this because I don't want to like start making. But like, dude, I'm finding names of companies, of people that own the companies. And I'm like, what's the ethics in naming the names of these people right now? Firstly, what's the risk of my physical health if I start naming names? But like I come across a company, for instance, and I haven't been able to totally verify that Pro V&V was the company that was used to audit I know it did the Georgia election, audited the Georgia election. This company's been working with Dominion on and off since 2015, testing their software, according to the EAC, which is this government election agency. And so they called it an independent audit, but it was a company that Dominion had been working with over and over again. So that's like if I'm like, well, you've been testing my car to make sure it runs fine for 8 years. Now we got to get an independent global audit of my car. Let me get the guy who tests it every time to go test it again. That's not independent. That's a guy I know.
Right.
So that alone, I'm like, oh God. And then I find the name of the guy that owns Pro V&V, and I'm like, oh geez. And he worked for a company before that worked with Dominion from 2011. And
the problem. So I respect Destiny as a debater. Here's one of the things. I think his politics are terrible. I think he's a solid debater, but he's never done anything personally to me except like behind the scenes in the interactions I had with him that I could complain about him being an immoral person. And I try to judge people based on my interactions with him, not stories I've heard. So kudos to you for going out and talking. I know you moderated his debate with Alex Jones and stuff, which looked like a difficult...
It was epic, dude.
Job to moderate that. That's
fucking epic.
Not an envious task to moderate that, because it was a no-win situation in many cases with that many personalities up there.
But, it was like riding a bull. It was like, hold on. That was all it was.
It's Alex.
Hold on.
Let me ask you, if not to get too personal on this, but if I could ask real quick, was that in Alex's studio?
Yeah.
See,
InfoWars
I
studio.
knew it. I had it nailed what happened there. I think this is just, I think I have good intuition of people. This is what I think happened, right? I think Alex is like, I'm having some buddies over. We're going to have a discussion. We'll record that shit. It'll be great. Get them all out here. Come on, we'll do it. Come on, guys. I'll have a nice discussion about this shit, right? He's not looking at it like this is like a debate with serious people with like suits and ties and we're talking about important issues. So he's just like he would his normal show. You're guest in my house. I'm going to do this show like I do any other show. I'm going to be bombastic. And I don't think he meant any insults by that. I think that's his character. And when I was reviewing that debate, I said, I'll bet this is an Alex studio. Because it's like he's at home. It's like how when you're at home and you invite guests over, you don't care if you put your feet up on the coffee table. Hey, man, it's your coffee table, right? So I'm glad to hear that I was right about that.
Yes, it was exactly. It was much like that. Yeah. And as the night went on, like at first Alex would look over at me and I'd be like, Alex. And he'd look at me and he'd be like, okay. And he'd like quiet down. But then as the night went on, I'd be like, Alex. And he'd look over and he'd be like, not this time, Crossland.
Right,
and then
it's
he'd be like,
hell.
nah. And he'd take over. But sorry. So I derailed a little. You were saying, Stephen, great debater.
Yeah.
Gonna hang out.
One of the things he'll do. So what makes him an effective debater? One of the things he'll try to do is he'll try to get you mired down on specific things that he could call you a conspiracy theorist about, or try to find one little thing that he thinks that he has you on. Like, for example, if you say Biden said this, he'll a lot of times, and this isn't a bad tactic or nefarious or anything, he'll say, show me proof, right? And then you'll show proof that he did it, and then he'll move on. Oh, okay. And you could go back. I had a debate with him. It was on this channel called Politically Revoked 2 years ago about Trump's versus Biden's record. It happened over and over again. I said Biden was questioning vaccine efficacy before he won the election. No, he wasn't. Yeah, he was. And I showed the quotes. Oh, okay. Mike Flynn, it said, I don't recall. And that's what they said he lied about. No, he didn't. Then we read through it. Oh, okay. And this happens constantly with me. So the reason I say this is you have to be careful. Because if you stand up and you say, Jim Smith owns this company and they didn't audit this election, blah, 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 he's going to go through that with a fine-tooth comb. He's going to say, well, wait a minute, you said it. Now we're going to interrogate this. And he's going to make you seem like a conspiracy theorist. The things that you don't have to delve deeply in to know about our election security are things like this. We know that Zuckerbucks, billions of those dollars or hundreds of millions of them, went to places in swing states particularly, in areas where it would be beneficial to Democrats. We sent all of this money. Do we want one of the largest corporations in the world being instrumental in how we proffer our elections? And go ahead.
You're saying Zuckerbucks is in Meta, Mark Zuckerberg's platform,
like
funded
Facebook,
stuff? What did it fund exactly?
So the initiatives were supposedly that it was sending money to these sort of sites, to specific districts to help have money to proffer the election, to pay for, the people that would be there that were the watchers and to the people that were counting the votes and things like that. If you really want a good crash course in this, go watch Molly Hemingway's testimony yesterday in front of the House committee. She talks about all of this. And this isn't stuff that's like, oh, Dominion voting machines had a studio in Germany and like it's not that stuff, right? This is actual numbers that went. There's other things like my question, and this, you never always do what you believe. Don't be dishonest or say things that you don't believe in. But for me, what I said initially, I believe that I think that there was corruption when it came to the voting numbers and how they were counted and stuff like that. But I don't really care. And that might sound weird. How can that be? Because I see a bigger issue. What I said the day after the election was, what if they didn't cheat? What if they were able to drag this doddering old man who wasn't campaigning, Joe Biden, across the finish line? What if large corporations, our mainstream media, our military-industrial complex, executive agencies, the entertainment industry, and academia could come together and drag Joe Biden across the finish line? What national election would they not be able to win? Whoever Facebook wants, they'll get. Whoever Google wants, they get. In perpetuity for the rest of our time being alive as Americans. That's a scarier thought than me. And so you could look up this guy, Robert Epstein, who's a professor. And he said that Google's algorithm alone would be able to sway 16 million votes. The way that Google, and they went through all this research and how if you type into Google search engine Donald Trump versus Joe Biden, all of the nefarious things they would do, or how Google, that Alphabet that owns them, owns YouTube, how they were censoring certain speakers or certain content creators that were saying favorable things about Trump, promoted those that were saying, like, and all the, like, they censored the Hunter Biden story. All of these things, that's the real election interference. That's the sort of, that's not to say that, oh, I'm saying that they didn't change votes on voting. I'm not saying that, but I haven't delved into that in a big way. What I have delved into is how the government, working in tandem with places like social media places, were able to sway enough votes in an election that was basically determined by about 40,000 people in 3 swing states. And what do we do about that? What have the consequences been? They lied right to our face. All the Hunter Biden stuff, that's all Russian disinformation. 57 former intel officials signed on. Nope, that's Russian disinformation. And then as soon as the election's over, they're like, oh, geez, I guess you're right. Oh, well, next election. It's over with now. And that's exactly what Destiny will say. He'll say, whatever, it's over with now. That's what they always do. They tell you you're a crazy conspiracy theorist in real time when you're telling them the corruption that's occurring. And then once the evidence trickles out 3 years later, they go, okay, you were right, but it's over with now. Now what can we do? Moving on to the next thing, which they're going to call you a crazy conspiracy theorist and say is not true. Then you'll find out 3 years later from now you were right, and they'll say, well, whatever, it's too late now. That's how they'll operate, and they're okay with it. And the truth is, and I've said kind words about Destiny, I'll say this. The truth is, he is such a partisan hack that he deep down has either convinced himself or is intentionally engaged with the double standard. He's okay with it. He don't really give a shit that they illegally spied on Trump's team. Don't really care. Don't care that they censored the Hunter Biden story. Doesn't care. If Trump did it, if Trump's team had used FISA warrants to spy on Biden's, he'd be screaming his livid head off. You know it. I know it. All the Democrats know it. We all know it. But when it's Trump, it's okay. So that's the advice I would give. Be careful if you bring up specific names and stuff, because he will interrogate. As he should.
Yeah. I need no. We should be comparing notes basically, because it's more about just like, let's get to the bottom of this. What do you got? And then we're gonna be like, this is what I got. I don't know. I think it's real, and this seems real. This is really.
They call it like, think about it this way, right? If I would just to say, let's say we're looking at a country, a different country that you know nothing about, and I said to you, hey Ian, there was this pandemic that occurred in this country, and they had to massively change the way they voted, right? It used to be like single day, they showed up in person, they voted in person. Now it's like half the people are voting by mail weeks before, and it's occurring in areas that have never really done this, right? They never did the mass mail voting and stuff like that. Do you think that there could be problems with that election? And a normal person would say, yeah, there could be more potential for fraud and illegal stuff. But even beyond that, there could be potential for innocent mistakes, right? People not filling out the address form correctly. And so there could be ballots that if it was a close election, that change in the way they voted, there's probably going to be some growing pains. Now, maybe if you vote like that for 10, 20 years, then there's less growing pains because you got used to it. Like, that's what anyone would believe. Instead, we're told, no. They massively changed the way we voted, and it was the most secure election ever. The most.
That's what gets me, is when they're like, it was the most free and fair. I'm like, what does these words even mean, actually? Why does it keep getting repeated, these words? They say secure, free, and fair, 3 words that I keep hearing. And I'm like, what does this even mean, dude?
It's like, I don't know. No, again, I'm a simple person. I'm sure that you could bring someone on that sort of has studied sort of mass manipulation better than me. But it's these catchwords. Did you ever notice that? Like when you hear when you hear movements that are trying to get like public attention and public sympathy, they always have these catchy phrases like Black Lives Matter, right? Like, what are you really saying? Like, or you go to like a trans protest and they're yelling all this stuff. And it's like, but what is that? That's just slogans. You're not saying anything. You're just saying something that's catchy that low-informed people can glom onto. You remember with COVID, it was, what do you want, grandma to die? What does that mean? Oh, it's the most secure election ever. Wait, what are you talking about? Like, and that's your trigger that like something's up. This is propaganda. Because you could have easily said, like I said earlier, you could say, sure, there were growing pains, probably less secure than previous elections, but no evidence that it was over the benchmark that Trump actually won. You could make that argument. That's a reasonable argument, but they didn't do that. And not only didn't they do that, they said most secure election ever. Then they censored you. And they said you can't talk about it. And if you talk about it, you're maybe an insurrectionist, and you can't talk about it on platforms like YouTube, because and I can't tell you how many times I've been demonetized, had community guideline strikes on YouTube for talking about election security, until it didn't matter anymore. 3 years later, they're like, okay, now you can talk about it. It doesn't matter. We'll change our rules on that. But how much viewership did I lose? I don't know. It's hard to get a foothold on these platforms because of that sort of stuff. And it didn't just happen in a nutshell. It happened in every single institution. Our mainstream, like just take the Hunter Biden laptop story, right? The government, groups of the government went to the Aspen Institute and were telling people months before the story broke that hypothetically, let's do a scenario where Russians get a hold of Hunter Biden's personal information. They literally used Hunter Biden's name. It's in the Twitter files. What if the Russians go? Meanwhile, the FBI full well knew that this laptop existed, that the information out there was accurate. They knew it, right? And yet they gaslit people. And so then these companies like Twitter is like, oh, geez, this is exactly what the FBI told us was going to, or it was CISA, I think, that told them was going to say. And so I guess this is Russian disinformation. We're going to censor it. Meanwhile, at the same time, we had all of the entertainment industry, the cast of the Avengers, your favorite rapper, all of these people, they're all pushing for Biden. Yeah, all corporate America, basically, they're all pushing. It's every institution in this country. And he still only won by like 40 or 50,000 votes in a few swing states. What are they, what are we going to do as a society? And to just say, no, it's the most secure election ever and you can't question any of these things. Again, this is the same people that told you the 2016 election was stolen because Russians, you remember this? You remember, well, what about the Russians, the Internet Research Agency? I don't know if you remember this. See, they convicted 13 Russians. The Mueller team did. They charged 13 Russians for interfering in our election. Really, what'd they do? You want to know what they did? You want to know what the big hubbub was? There was one Democratic senator that called this an act of war. They went on Pokemon Go and Facebook and had $100,000 worth of ads, half of which were pro-Democrat causes like pro-Black Lives Matter, and half of which weren't seen till after the election. So that means at best you could say $25,000 of ads on Facebook and Pokemon Go. And we were told by almost every institution in our country that was an attack on our country. That was stealing the election. But when Zuckerberg's sending millions upon millions of dollars to these election sites, when the mainstream media is repeating hoax after hoax about Donald Trump being a Russian agent and then intentionally covering up real stories that are critical of Joe Biden, that's not election interference. Why does it matter? If the idea is with foreign election interference, what is the root cause of why that's a bad idea? Well, we don't want people that don't have a vested interest in the outcome of the United States to be influencing our system. That's the idea. So the founding fathers wouldn't want Britain influencing votes in our country because they didn't think Britain had the best interest of the United States. Does Microsoft? Does Facebook? Does CNN? Does the New York Times? And yet we allow them to have massive influence. If Facebook would have paid for the same ads that the Russians did, would that have been considered election interference? Or is it okay because a massive multinational corporation did it? These are the sorts of questions that no one asks. And it's unbelievably infuriating the way they gaslight you, that they'll try to make a mountain out of a molehill when it's ads on Pokemon Go and Facebook from some no-names in Russia, but when almost every institution in our country is pushing for the other guy, including spreading disinformation and covering up, they're like, well, it's no big deal. Accidents happen.
This, you ever play Shadowrun?
Oh, yeah.
Or games
I'm playing
where
on the Switch, believe it.
Oh, nice, dude. It's like a dystopian future where corporations govern the world. I mean, it's predictive program. It's like, I don't know. It's a great game. It's like
Kismet,
D&D.
man. I was just talking to my wife about this today. I just said, because I was watching the Cyberpunk anime as well. And I was like, you notice in it's a very similar theme in Cyberpunk, where it's, they live in Night City, but what's the problem? Miltech, Arasaka. So these corporations, right? That's the ones that are really running the, Shadowrun's the same way. Like these dragons run these corporations,
Oh, do you play a dwarven wizard by any chance in Shadowrun?
I do not. I'm a human Decker in my game.
Deckers are the guys that hack their brains into the machine?
Yes. So but yeah, that's weird that you brought that up because I just saw those games were on sale on Switch and I remember playing them years ago. Well, I'm an old man, so I remember when they came. I remember the pen and paper Shadowrun game, but then they made
I never played
Sega
it.
and a Super Nintendo game, and it was weird because even back then, it was one of the games that had the same name. It was Shadowrun on Sega and Shadowrun on Super Nintendo, and they were completely different games. They weren't even like close to the same. One was almost like a point and click RPG and the other was an action game. And so it was I thought that was weird growing up. Like, how could the same game be in the same? And then they put out the computer games in 2014, 15.
Those isometric. Yeah, I love those. Like Baldur's Gate. I like when they, anyway, I think let's wrap it up, brother.
Let's do it.
This is a good call.
Yeah,
Good show.
I'd be happy to come on again. I just want to say personally, thank you, by the way, for kind of pushing me on your social media platforms and everything. It means a lot to me. It is hard to get a foothold in these things. One of the things I like to do is do these debates. I respect like the abilities of someone like Destiny. I think, and I know I'm biased, but I think in all of the times I've debated him, I've done very well. And so I struggle sometimes when I see people that are sort of aligned with me, that get opportunities to debate him on a big stage that I don't get, that I don't think are performing as well as I think that I could have. So it's nice to have recognition and to be able to have a platform where I could kind of push back, because I think when I say our side, I'm not including necessarily you, because I don't know if you agree with me with everything, but people on sort of this populist side, I think we're bereft, partially because social media have intentionally kept people down, but also partially because it's hard to get your name out there. It's easier to sort of, I hate to use this word, but it's easier to be sort of a grifter. It's easier to like just be like, my side's always right, the other side's always evil. Those are the voices like that you see on X that get promoted really. And so I think that you and Tim and a handful of other people that have made your own way, I'm really inspired by it. And it's nice to like have someone reach out to me and have the ability to.
Yeah, dude. One of the greatest things about being famous, I think fame in general, is that you can use it to make other people famous. Like you can find someone that's brilliant that hasn't been recognized yet and show the world, look at this person. Also, you get access to like talk to people that are really great on earth that you want to talk to because they know who you are.
Who would it be if you could pick like one, like politics, culture, if you could pick one person tomorrow to like have a sit down conversation with, who would it be?
Tomorrow was Fridays, like in the afternoon. Yeah, I'm like, I don't know. Well, as you were asking the question, I was thinking about Jordan Peterson. He's the guy who said that, who was like, the greatest thing about being famous is that I can talk to whoever I want on earth now. I can just go like, because they all know who he is.
He'd be near the top of my list of people I'd love to talk to.
JP's would be a good combo. Elon also, as my brain started thinking about your question, I was like, well, Elon would be good just to talk about AI and free software and like, you know, Transformers, like the Autobots and the Decepticons and where we're headed.
I'd love to talk
probably
to
those
Keanu
couple.
Reeves. I think that'd be cool.
Yeah, Keanu's great. I met him once. I used to wait tables. We waited tables on him. He's super cool. At least he was that day. He was chilling.
That's awesome.
I like that guy. Awesome. All right, Rob. Ladies and gentlemen, Rob Noerr. Like the video, share with your friends, and everybody. Subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to Rob. Follow him on the internet everywhere. It's great stuff, man. Always good to see you, dude.
Thank you. Look forward to talking to you soon.
Hell yeah, man. All right, we're wrapping it up. See you later.
Take it easy.
Oh, we're off.
All right.
I had a super chat. I didn't read.
I'm still streaming, so don't say anything too crazy.
Oh, cool. Here, we can read this super chat specifically for your audience.
Oh.
Can't wait for that Tucker interview. World peace, not WW3. Team humanity must proceed further. Ian, you are cool, man.
Awesome.
Thanks, Coach Chisel 4000.
No, my audience is big fan. In fact, the first time I had seen you was on Temple, but I didn't know you had your own show until like 2 months ago. Someone was like, "You ever watch Ian's own show?" From my audience, and then I started watching. It was like one of the things that I was really excited to talk to you about is I love talking to people. I believe in the idea of diversity, of perspectives, and I think that your brain thinks in a way that's so different than mine that I love bouncing ideas off people like that. Like when I was in college, all of my friends that weren't debate friends were artists. And I'm the worst artist you ever meet. I have the complete opposite personality. But those were the people I was drawn to because it's like, I want to hang out with people that think about things differently than me. That's how I grow as a person. So I was like, you know, I can't wait to talk to you because I knew that you think about things in a different way, which brings different things out of me. So I was very excited.
Yeah, this is a great combo. I feel very comfortable asking you about the depths of the encyclopedic knowledge of your brain, this global corporation movement. It's so important.
One of the things, if I ever get a chance to talk to you again, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, it's something that I always try to bounce off people. How do I grow as a person in order, I don't mean grow my channel and stuff like that. I mean to be a more effective communicator in explaining these difficult stories to people that don't really have the time to delve into them. Because one of the things that happens is I get lost in the sauce. We start talking about Burisma, and all of a sudden I start talking about like, oh, MP Onishenko, you know, that went there. And, you know, like my neighbor that's a farmer is like, huh? What are you talking about? And so it's difficult for me to find that balance of giving specific details on the stuff I've looked into, but also keeping it authentic and simple enough for the average person to understand.
My advice would be work out. If you start working out and you get ripped, your neighbors will come up to you and be like, "Rob, what was that thing you were talking about, Burisma?"
That's great advice. That actually, yeah, it is something. I'm engaged in a weight loss contest right now with another small streamer, and I'm absolutely going to destroy him. I'm going to start going to the gym, but I think that's great advice, and it goes into the theme of working on yourself before, that's the old Jordan Peterson, clean your own room before you try to change the world.
It's been, for me, it's been dramatic noticing how much more respect people have for my opinions when I look and I seem healthy. I'm going to go work out after we jump off. Actually,
before you leave, I did promise someone I would say this. I have this friend, Drone Tech Politics. He is the person, the first time I ever live streamed, I was streaming to one person on YouTube, and it was him. And I was such a boomer, I couldn't figure it out. And this dude I've never met's like, here, let me help you use the technology to get it. His name's Drone Tech Politics. He has a channel. 17 years ago, you did a video about a video he did. He was so excited when he found out I was doing your show today. He was like, oh my gosh, 17 years ago this happened.
Yeah, Drone Tech. I remember him.
Yeah. He
Cool.
says hi, and he was very excited to find that video from 17 years ago. So
sweet. I'd love to see him. Does it say like Drone Tech something? Back when you could do video responses, probably. I would do the video response.
His take on a war or something like that, yeah.
Drone Tech. I remember that name, yeah. I think I remember, yeah.
He's
cool, man.
Yeah, he what he does now is he focuses on sort of the media double standards. So when I'm focusing more on the FBI and stuff like that, he's focused on me. But he's a great guy. And I thought that was awesome. You look great, too, 17 years ago. You looked as like a youthful exuberance. Yeah,
it was quite a time, man. A lot of weed smoking over those. That was like right before I got super deep into weed, which was part of why I didn't blow up at the time. I was like, I'm afraid to be famous. If I get famous, they'll kill me. I need to do this subtly, because it was just so much cult worship. And I was like, this doesn't feel right. So I just smoked myself into a corner and like, I
was an alcoholic. I had asthma, so I never got. I smoked, but my big thing was, and I've ran for Congress, so this is always difficult to talk about. Like, I was big into psychedelics, mushroom acid, stuff like that. But only once in a while, I was a drinker. It shows,
dude. Psychedelics is the way.
Yeah.
In the microdosing, like psilocybin, I had some over New Year's, and it was just my memory lit up. I was like, I have great memory. It's easy to play guitar. It was nice, and I danced.
Dad now, I have a difficult time justifying doing it as a dad now. I'm like, I don't know. I could do that, or I could go play with dinosaurs. So,
yeah. Ben Stewart will leave. He goes on like ayahuasca ceremonies. He'll like leave and go to the ceremony for a week or two, and I think it's hard on him to leave his wife and kids behind for a week or two. Like he feels drawn to the cause, but also the challenge of, I would imagine.
Hey, those are like, it's no different than being in a band. I have friends that are like 40s and decided after having 2 kids, I'm going to hit the road. But it's like, no, dude, you have responsibilities now. Take care of that kid first, right? When you're a young like anyone who's listening, if you're a young man, the world is at your fingertips. Take a risk, do something, right? You could start a channel, you could join a band, but those opportunities, once you have different priorities, you'd be surprised how quick it creeps up on you, where it's like, I can't do 8-hour streams every day like I used to, because I got a kid now. I got other priorities. So, Ian,
do you ever bring your kid on the show? Do you ever bring him online, or do you hide the face right now?
So
are you in that face?
So the day he was born, I showed a picture. We did a little video where you could see him swaddled. And then there was a couple times before he was really verbal, where I just brought him on, was like, "Hey, buddy," and just. And then I had some people say some really horrible stuff. And so I realized it was probably a bad idea to ever have him on screen again. So
I've noticed, I believe in like collective consciousness in some ways, and like, I've seemed to be noticing a phenomenon where if people show their children on the internet, the kids become more beautiful. It's as if the people want the kid to be beautiful, but that doesn't mean the kid's healthier. The kid might end up having more mental trauma from being exposed to the world, but their physical beauty improves. So there's like I don't know what the trade-off is exactly, because it's still early in this technology.
Well, what I think about all the time is 20 years from, let's even go less than that. 15 years from now, my kid's going to be in high school. And someone's going to be like, hey, I found this video of your dad 15 years ago ranting and raving about, Joe Biden. What do you think of that? And that's weird enough. But then the next step I take is, and what if they say, and I saw you? Like, my kid never consented to be on here. 15 years from now, is that weird to him to be like, hey, Dad, why'd you put me out there? Now it's out there, and, we all know once it's out there, even if you delete the video, if someone wants to. So
yeah,
I struggle with that,
It's nice to let people humiliate themselves and not force it on them. Same with like making internet videos can be quite humiliating if you're in a compromising position, or if it's when you were young and you were like, you didn't have inhibition yet. So like, I do understand that. I had to do it to myself. If someone had put my childhood videos online without my knowledge or consent, I would be like,
yeah, even if
I might have been fucked up by that.
Yeah.
Stuff to, yeah, interesting.
But all right, hey, thank you for the opportunity again. Anytime, come
Always.
on. But we'll keep in touch, and hopefully I'll see you. I think March 1st is when tentatively they had me penciled in for Tim's show. So
awesome.
there. Yeah,
let's do it.
I'm
all right, Robbie.
Excited, man. We'll see.
Catch you later, man.
In real life, man. Take it easy.
Yeah, dude. See you.
Awesome. Very much enjoyed that. So some apologies to make first. Sorry for the first 5 minutes of that. As always, Boomer me. I hit the mute button on the desktop audio so you couldn't hear him. What's up? Thank you for the follow, Red Robin, by the way. Thank you so much. I thought it was a good interview. Yeah, just to say real quick about like the drug stuff there at the end, I'm not going to deny who I was, but I can honestly say I don't think I've done an illegal drug in 8-9 years. I grew out of it. I was young, stupid, alcoholic, but then I met the greatest woman in the world and have a kid. So the audio's low now. Yeah, sorry about that. But yeah, I thought it went great. I really enjoyed that conversation. And I think it was great that it wasn't like, I'll tell you what I was worried about. And when I say worried, I don't mean worried like, oh my gosh, I'm afraid. But what I didn't want to have happen on that was to just have it be like an hour and a half specifically on like Burisma or specifically on Russiagate or something like that. Not that I can't do that, but I do that stuff all the time. And I thought in a different audience to not a 5-hour stream, it's just going to be an hour or two. I thought it would be more digestible for a different audience if it was more just general sort of worldview stuff. So I was very pleased with it. I was pleased with the direction. I always worry that I talk too much. So hopefully Ian wasn't upset with that because I don't. Yeah, I hope you all enjoyed it. So I'm going to head out. This will be it for me until next week. Oh, I'm going to end this recording. See y'all. Okay, this will be it for me until probably next week. I'm going to try to put some short-form videos out, though, so hopefully you'll see them. But I'm going to go downstairs. My wife is making a delicious dinner, and I think some of my in-laws are coming over, so it's going to be a great night, and I'm really looking forward to it. So thank you all so much. Also, I think it's March 1st. I'm tentatively scheduled to be on Tim Pool's show. Ian should be there as well, so it's going to be on the daytime show, The Culture War. And I think it'll be interesting to go on there. I can't wait to talk to Ian and Tim again and anyone else that's on that show with me. I think it'll be a lot of fun. I just want to thank Ian again for giving me the opportunity. It was a lot of fun. And I also want to thank everyone in my audience that pushed for me to sort of be able to reach out to different people, to grow as a channel and to grow connections, to be able to talk to people. I wouldn't be able to do that without you all. Partly because I'm inept, because I'm really bad at promoting myself, and partly because I'm lazy, because I don't make that effort to reach out as much as I should. Not only have some of you, Aftershock, Surian, some of you others, my brother, legitimately reached out and sent super chats to people like Ian, but you also encourage me to do that stuff. So I do want to thank all my audience. So thank you so much. All right, I'm heading downstairs to play with the little guy. I met my son. Don't take that the wrong way. So hang out with Hank. I think I promised him we're going to do Animal Safari. He's got a bunch of safari creatures he likes to hide around, and then I have to find them. So thank you guys so much. I hope you enjoyed the show. We'll talk to you soon. As always, have a good one.